Welcome to the GSL Group D cast, actually. Apparently the scheduling got rearranged. So we did A, we did B, and now we are doing D, and you did not miss C. That's going to be next week. In the top right of Crimson Court for our first preliminary match, it is going to be the blue Zerg Solar. And on the bottom left, as the red Zerg, we do have DRG. Who, by the way, is a cheesin'. That's called a cheese right there. That is a gas, then pool, all on early supply prior to your first Overlord. Classic ZVZ. Crimson Court, the second shortest map on the map pool, I want to say. So maybe not terribly surprising to see this right off the bat, ZVZ. Especially when you consider some of the, I guess, other motives to do this, you know, getting kind of a head start, getting a jump start, taking advantage of any practice that your opponent didn't do, any warm-up they didn't do, right? So, it's a couple of good reasons, and it is also Korean ZVZ, which classically is seen as a much more aggressive matchup, especially thanks to the, 10 years that Europe was just the most boring ZVZ ever. Hasn't been that way for a while, but it was that way for a long time. Anywho, so my point of bringing this up is that Solar should kind of be aware of the possibility here, you know? Like, if he gets totally blindsided, he's like, how dare he go for an early pool, an early gas? Oh my god. Oh, that's on him. So absolutely should not be the case. Nonetheless, it's all about the execution. These pros know how to defend these things, but execution is a whole nother matter. And you can see here that actually the first Overlord will not be seeing the exit of the first lings or of the second pair of lings. It still has yet to see, of course, the lacking natural hatchery. Not that Solar can really do a whole lot. He basically can prepare mentally now that he's seeing a couple of lings go out, right? At the same time, the lings show up at his hatchery. So that's all he can do. And now he's got to think through exactly what he's got to do here and what other problems there could be. So quick check on the natural. Okay, there's actually no hatchery whatsoever. This has got to be a real dedicated attack. And he'd be absolutely right about that. This is interesting. So DRG, you know, usually you'd see these lings nibble at the hatchery as much as they possibly can. But I love the area of this, actually. This is just a reduced surface area on the banelings, just in case. But yeah, he actually didn't attack the hatchery the entire time. He purposefully kept his units on hold positions that be surrounding the larva popping. And I guess because the power spike of this build is not those lings up of the hatchery, you know, if this was an expansion from DRG, then really you're looking to maybe even get that hatchery killed and then leave and do your own thing. But the power spike is obviously when speed hits and banelings hit, and that is what DRG was more so waiting on. He wants to end the game. He doesn't want to be satisfied with just a hatchery kill. Solar knew this, figured it out pretty quickly. Spinecrawler in the natural mineral line is a great place to start. Also has his own banelings. 3 drones, 4 drones go down. Make that 5. And that is, so far, a somewhat successful defense. Yeah. Unfortunately, losing 6 drones instead of just that 3, which maybe would have been possible if there was a quicker mineral pool back with the drones. It might have been possible to stop at least that last 2 drone going down, right? It would have been better. Would have been the best. But there's really only so much you can do. Obviously, keeping that hatchery alive is just not supposed to happen. DRG, you know, he did a very committed attack very early on the gas in the pool. A lot of gas also mines. That's tons of minerals away from his pocket. Does have the option to expand now. It's a little weird, and since Solar's also recognizing, hey, this guy's getting a hatchery, this guy's kind of moving on, you kind of have to as well. You just don't have that many minerals, or sorry, that much larva with the minerals that you're gathering. But anyway, like, he's got to go into droning as well, and he's going to be able to do that and keep that slight lead that he got from just not doing the cheese and defending, like I said, pretty well. But a 2 drone difference is going to only matter so much when DRG is mining much more efficiently off of that natural hatchery. So something that Solar really needs to get to. Good save on that drone. Nice attempt from DRG to snipe it. Every drone counts, and every second delay on the hatchery also counts. This one's going to be delayed and killed. Nicely done. DRG just adding the seconds here, adding 1 drone at a time, keeping himself now in a somewhat lead, I guess. Solar is just droning. The Overlord did have to move away for Solar because Queens are now out and about, but this Overlord can still see that there's nothing on the way. I mean, that doesn't mean there's not 30 lings being bulked up in the main base, of course. but this is some information. What Solar really needs to determine, however, is seriously the exact follow-up. Whether that is 30 Lings in the main or Roach Warren. And a Roach Warren it is, actually. So DRG, he's going to be able to get away with this until the roaches show themselves. And then Roach is going to be slow, obviously, but it is a shorter map, so you got to take that into account. But DRG knows that this probably won't be scouted or figured out for a while, just because Solar... maybe. Okay, I was going to say maybe you could get a Speedling in, but you do want to make sure that doesn't happen. You got Banelings, you got that wall, nicely done from DRG. Now, that Ling might have been able to see a lack of drones. Not even really, actually. DRG almost saturated on 2 bases completely, so that's not necessarily a reveal, I suppose. And then meanwhile, DRG's Lings got in there and saw that the fast lair is on the way. Roach Warren as well, but that Roach Warren is the second building. It is not even halfway done, and DRG is now running across the map with some roaches. Now also expanding to that Rich Vespian Geyser, which I don't know if that's going to play a part in this game, because, you know, I don't know how long it's going to last, but these roaches, while they do reveal themselves, start traveling across the map, there's not that much alongside with them. There's not a heavy swell of Lings that would usually accompany something a lot more dedicated, and this Ling from Solar is going to confirm that. Oh, actually, Solar getting a little bit aggressive. Baneling, one of them went down before entering into the mineral line, but 2 is the magic number, and that's killed 5 drones. That is going to put Solar ahead by 5 as they both continue trying to drone up. That'll probably keep steady-ish or, you know, around that amount so that Solar is just straight up ahead. Now, DRG might have a faster third hatch, but now it's the kind of the opposite problem. You know, I said DRG has the hatchery to get, you know, some better efficient mining going. Well, now it's the opposite. Solar doesn't have another hatchery to get efficient mining should he make more drones, so gotta wait for that, and that one is coming down in the middle as well. It kind of makes sense. I mean, it's going to be a real knife fight in a phone booth. This is what they would always call ZVZ, and it was especially true when it was basically all Lings. No, ladder is still mostly like a Ling all-ins and dying to stupid Banling stuff, but back in the day, it was really all of that, and then there was also much shorter maps, which contributed to, you know, less of the Roach versus Roach sleep fest that we would get later into like 2013, 14, 15. And so the short maps, also with like limited bases and maybe some peculiarities to how they actually want you to take the bases on the map, would mean that you're just right up close to the other guy. And we're getting a little bit of that vibe again here on Crimson Court, where they are both expanding in a very natural process. CVZ can quickly turn from a defensive Zerg to an offensive Zerg. So, you know, usually in the other matchup, Zerg is the more defensive, reactionary race. We know that, so they expand away from their opponent. But in ZVZ, it's a little trickier. We do have the Rich Vespian Geyser actually being used. I wasn't certain to go that long, but they both kept on droning, actually. Not so much on the big attempt to a secondary all-in. I mean, there might be what you could still call a second all-in, I guess, just not as fast as I was expecting, because DRG has stopped making drones, is building nothing but army. +1 missile will finish eventually. However, Solar, I mean, he's actually just one step ahead. So if DRG is thinking, like, I can maybe hit this guy when he's not quite prepared, he's invested too much into something else, that's not actually accurate. Solar also not going for many more drones, especially because his hatch really just recently finished, but you know, he actually already has +1 missile. That's something that DRG can click on and say, like, well, there's no timing here. What do I do now? And that is the ebb and flow of ZVZ, so maybe some drones being added on. Perhaps you could take a better fight. Now the upgrades are even. DRG, though, with more Ravagers, has more of that crowd control potential, but then, you know, if they're not hitting or they're not actually popping their Corrosive Biles, they're not as useful. Here we go. You can start to see some of the effects, actually. I say crowd control because you do assume that Solar is going to dodge the Corrosive Biles. There's always a chance he doesn't do that. There's an attempt to focus fire down DRG's Ravager that did not work out. Actually kind of turns around. DRG grabs the first Ravager. Now he loses one as well. Solar getting very thin on roaches and actually is going to tap out, realizing that he has lost this particular tug of war. There is just more roaches there for DRG as Solar kept rallying his in. And honestly, that was just a decision problem. Otherwise, his setup was totally fine. He even had a spine crawler to fall back to. +2 was halfway done. DRG was basically all-inning here, something that Solar maybe was also kind of taken aback by. He was like, wait, no, I'm in such a good position. Like, you can't win with an all-in here. Maybe gotten a little overconfident. And rallying your roaches into a losing battle is a way to ensure a loss. So, Yeah, kind of a bummer there for Solar, who I thought was in a good position. But good news for DRG, who takes game number 1. Game 2 is going to be on Oceanborn, much bigger and one of the older maps as well. Bottom right's down a game. Whoops, it isn't. We do have Solar. And in the top left, we do have DRG, who, I mean, what is the reverse saying? You know, Solar kind of let defeat happen from the jaws of victory or whatever it is. Like, I don't want to say that Solar threw, because that's a really, really hard word for it, but I would say Solar on a better day, a little more warmed up perhaps, would not have made that mistake. Because I think it was a mistake of just continuing to rally forward. Had he realized at a more appropriate point that he wasn't going to win that battle, or it was going to be a little bit too one-sided to DRG, there was an option to retreat. So, you know, that might open up an opportunity for your Ravager to get sniped sometimes, and that does suck. But you would have been retreating into some more reinforcements, you know, which would bundle up together, and DRG is still the one who's working against the Fairness advantage, rallying farther away, and you had a spine crawler. I mean, that's what really, I feel like, is the kick in the nuts, is that you literally had a spine crawler you could have fallen back to, so there really is not much of an excuse not to. That spine crawler, you know, you don't just make it for no reason, you make it for safety. You make it because you think maybe you're ahead, and they're going to try and all-in you, and you just want that extra little defensive kick. So there is the sign that Solar knew that he had to be careful. They had to be a little scared, I guess, but then he didn't end up using the thing that he got. It's like going into a horror movie with a shotgun and then leaving the shotgun somewhere. And then the mass murderer kills you, and you're like, well, I should have brought that shotgun, shouldn't I? Well, yeah, he probably should have used that spine crawler, because I don't see any other reason why he wouldn't have to, right? Other than he thought he was going to win. He thought that there was that little sliver of time, which he just barely had the right tools. Or had he killed the Ravager, that would have been enough to, like, you know, wash his hands and be like, okay, out, and he didn't. I don't know, but he definitely overstayed his welcome, and that's really on him. There is a lot of the rest of the game was going his direction. He had fallen behind by technically 2 drones at the end there, you know, whatever, but he had that +2 missile on the way. So that was going to give him a big boost, even if there was a little more conundrum on, like, who had droned better or faster or whatever. So, time to let that game go. Same for Solar. He's got to just shake his head off of that one. DRG not opening with a super aggressive opener this time. Again, Solar should have been mentally prepared for that. Don't think that would have thrown him off, but sometimes you have bad days and good days. Sometimes you do get into overconfidence, so on and so forth. And they're both actually doing a very similar thing here. 3-hatch, speed on the way, and now we wait. We wait for the first swell of lings, or the first tech structure. It's an evolution chamber. Sorry, Baneliness doesn't count. Baneliness is safe. But if it's an evolution chamber, pretty much macro. But anything else, we gotta start talking about the possibilities. CVZ chock full of all-ins and deception builds, sneaky builds. I mean, it really has a lot going, which has made it a very frustrating matchup because it's also not as played with this variety of builds that seem to be able to work. It's become, you know, more volatile than just the micro of Ling Baneling. I think that's what people used to describe its volatility for. It's like back in 2011, it's like, you know, I misclicked once and then it was game over. This thing is so volatile and it sucks. I hate it. I mean, has that really been the case? Not so much. You can still misclick into a Baneling and lose your 3rd hatch and die, and that's bad. But, you know, you got into Roach versus Roach for so long. But now, in the last, like, 4 years, probably, 3 or 4 years, it's just been a less played matchup. Feels like a lot of builds are very valid. Feels like there's a lot of trickery, even more than like a Protoss would usually be known to have. And it still has the potential of like the Ling fights. But we are going into Roach Warrens for both players. Now, both of them going Roach Warren first here. No quick evolution chamber to try and get a head start on that +1, which really does seem to have faded away. Not that, again, we're casting that many ZVZs. They are one of the rarest matchups now, actually. But it does seem to have fallen by the wayside to just, like, kind of, you know, get 2 or 3 games in a row in which people just go 3-hatch, Baneling Nest for safety, evolution chamber into +1, you know, like the very, very basic and boring. But Solar is the one who's actually using his Roach Warren, which is obviously a big difference. DRG did make a handful of Lings and Banelings in action right now, and that is enough to actually overwhelm Solar's Roaches. Roaches sound like such a safe thing, but if they're overwhelmed, they're overwhelmed. And they're not popping out all at once, but they are eventually popping out, and DRG had not committed any further to Lings, so there really wasn't a chance to get that much of a snowball going there. Plus, Solar with Banelings can stop any attempt to snowball with Lings generally. He would have had to found him really with his pants down to get that as an option, which Solar was just barely ready to go. He barely had his pants on to open that door to receive his Grubhub delivery, you know, and it was a little shy. Now he's got a snapshot as proof of delivery with his pants off the rest of his life. But seriously, he's a little bit late. He loses some of the drones. He also kind of gets revealed as well. So DRG up 8 workers, because he just built 4 spine crawlers, by the way. He was up further before that. Realized, okay, I need to worry about this. I need to build roaches. So he was already building roaches. So even though he has droned more than Solar, he still is in a decent army supply position to work with Defender's advantage, especially because Solar is working with slow roaches. Solar going for this all in here, going to try and turn this best of 3 around, but I'm afraid it's not going to work out. Spine crawlers over halfway done with finishing, still plenty of roaches for DRG to fall back to those spine crawlers with. Queen's also helping, gathering energy for Transfuse. Lings run by, trying to find that economic damage because Solar realizes he's not going to push through this. He's actually going to win because DRG went to 60 drones. He's actually going to do something else, and it has been a total failure so far. That will be 4, no, that's 3 drones in the main, but that was not enough even after DRG had sacrificed so many drones to get the defenses up. So still that was like a 6-worker lead, and then obviously Solar goes back into droning. I was going to say DRG could go back into droning and then try and catch up in some ways, like on this layer and evolution chamber that Solar is trying to expedite to, or he could actually attack. And it might look a little weird now because he invested into 4 spine crawlers, but it is what it is. He thought he was in a desperate scenario, and now that desperate scenario is still kind of desperate in a way, because he has maybe fallen behind to Solar's droning, or to Solar's teching, or to Solar's whatever. So, ebb and flow continues. Solar did get that drone lead, now up by 12, but now his army supply, it's a complete reversal, actually. Complete reversal of the previous fight. Solar down by 10 army supply, but he does not have 4 spine crawlers finishing. He has 1 that is about halfway done, but DRG sees a moment to strike. He is going to push on through here. Solar realizes he will not be able to hold. He invested too much into the macro behind his attack. He was up 10 drones. He had a lair on the way, evolution chamber, and obviously no other defensive setup with the spine crawlers meant that he was just outgunned. DRG making all the right moves in this 2-0 to start things off. Let's head to the next match. Our second preliminary match will be a TVP. Bottom left for Shopify Rebellion, it is Byun. In the top right, we do have Nightmare as the Blue Protoss, who just recently joined a team. I think as of yesterday or something like that. So I believe he debuted with his team on the GSL. I just have to look up what it is because I'm not really familiar with it. It's apparently a decently big team, though, as usual in other esports. Bleed Esports. It is a Singaporean-based team with big rosters in Dota 2 and Valorant. And thank you, Gemini, for posting that on Reddit. So yeah, great, cool to see a lot of teams picking up a lot of different players. A lot of this is going to be for the Esports World Championship, which, we have, I don't even know how many determined players already going there. Not many. Not many, and it's not a very big tournament, actually. But there's always that chance that someone pops off on the Dallas tournament that's upcoming, or gathers enough points to get themselves in the lead, or people forfeit their spot, aka max packs, whatever. So we still have a lot of people being picked up, even if they might not necessarily be there. Anywho, so Byun versus Nightmare. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give this to Byun. Don't think that's too much of a surprise. Nightmare can be a tricky Protoss player. Still a unique player, not as unique as he once was. And kind of made his mark on the scene with DTs, then fell off, and then came back. But he's still kind of a tricky player. The thing is that I do think that he showed a lot of games in which he just makes good decisions off of good macro and good builds, so it's not that he's only going to cheese. If he can't cheese, then he can't win. It's not that strong, but if he can't just straight up cheese, like a proxy gate or something, and then we do see sometimes him going for those more mid-game surprises. like the mass gateways sometimes. I feel like not too much lately. And then I think what really makes him him is that he'll zig when other people would zag. So whether he's doing a regular build or an abnormal build, the point is either one, there's going to be decisions that kind of catch you off guard. And so in this matchup, that can kind of snowball. You know, if a Terran player expects you to attack when you're actually defending, that actually throws them off a lot. And that's sometimes what made the mass gateway build so tricky is that you couldn't quite get the read on whether they're all-inning off of it or trying to expand in tech. But we are not even close to that yet, but we do have a Twilight Council, so we might be getting closer to it. We'll see what Nightmare does. But Byun has the more established record. Nightmare has a couple of cool victories. He had a great lower bracket run that unfortunately wasn't broadcast, but he does have some of these things going for him. Well, when you compare him to Byun's accolades of winning a GSL, winning a world championship, winning multiple other tournaments, and just consistently being like a round of 8 player, Nightmare's accomplishments kind of pale in comparison. And I don't think Byun has ever... I've never really been scared of Byun's matchups. There's a couple of other really top-tier Terrans in which I watch a matchup and I'm just like, it feels like you're a little shaky there. Even if they don't think so, it just kind of looks that way. I never really felt that for Byun too much. Byun puts himself into situations that I think a lot of other Terran players would not be able to win. But then he has a bit of that Byun effect, a bit of that star power effect in which he wins them anyway. And that's in all the matchups, you know. He's one of the only guys who will still go for like a 2-base all-in versus Zerg, which most of the guys aren't doing. It's a 3-gate, by the way. The Reaper did scout the Twilight Council. Double Cyclone is what we've been watching here. And these Cyclones are a little fearsome because Nightmare went for so many Adepts. He is absolutely getting Blink. You don't often see a Protoss go a triple Adept opener into Blink. They usually start stockpiling the Stalkers after the first Adept, which is just really a very nice tool to have because it's so good at scouting, right? Gets in, it shades out, can't explain it. But otherwise, you go into Stalkers. Stalkers are a little more pricey, but I don't think it's really affected his build a whole lot. Well, Byun knows that it's a Blink build, or is pretty sure of it anyway. And he does see the second gateway. Even if he saw the third, the real issue is it a fourth? And are you going to dedicate to the Warpins? So, worst case scenario, it's a 4-gate, which means you should prepare to deal with a 4-gate, which means bunkers and tanks, which is exactly what Byun is getting, at least 2 tanks. And then once you start to feel out that it's not an all-in, it's not a 4-gate, it's not a lot of production off of 3 gateways, they've expanded, they've teched, whatever it is, well, you really aren't that bad off as a Terran player. You know, 2 tanks can still be helpful even if they try and dive towards charge after this. Nightmare is not dedicating very much to the gateways, by the way. So we got a Robo, but then actually didn't even get a Warp Prism, which is kind of abnormal. But in a lack of Warp Prism gets maybe a slightly faster third. I mean, the 3 gateway can also be used as a defensive tool in case you think your opponent is going to be really aggressive. And that's not a bad thing to think when you're facing Byun. I guess they could also just add in some more gateways, and he's going for a rather gateway-focused army. The Temple Archives being added in, obviously going to get Storms will have some type of splash, but a lot of charge lots, emphasis. So a lot of gateways are coming down here. A lot of gateways. At this point, Nightmare is picking up 100% on the fact that Byun has 3 CC'd. Not immediately, but there is that faster third CC still. Actually, Scan the Observer, good job. But he knows what's up at this point, right? I mean, initially didn't know what's up. The Cyclones were kind of scary because not only could they have taken on more units in a worst-case scenario, but they also stopped those Adepts, all 3 of them, or a singular Adept, from really getting back in there to scout. So you wouldn't blame Nightmare if he was just being cautious with 3 gateway. But like I said, it also just going to add into his really mass gateway play here. Oh, I was going up to 9 gateway. I was like, that's crazy. He's going up to 8, which is a pretty good number. Somehow an Adept got in. He's getting some type of moderate scouting, positioning mostly. Stalker is going to actually jump in here. Okay, so that's what the Adept was scouting. All right, see how close the army was. The Stalkers get in, kill 2 SCVs. Probably should have been able to get a third. Missed it, though, and we'll blink out. I mean, these little tiny things. Keeping tabs on the Terran at this point as they build up to their medevacs. Once the medevacs are out, then you're the one that's got to be a little more worried about defending. But actually, in this case, it is Byun who needs to be really worried about defending. Byun has not scouted since that Twilight Council in the 3rd Nexus, right? But this could have gone into Mass Gateway, only Gateway as well. Nice save on that tank from the medevac. This could have gone into Storm, which it did. Or it could have gone into Colossus. And that's something that Byun just wasn't aware of until basically now. You know, with the aggressive move outs, I don't know if he actually got sight on the Warp Prism. You're starting to put 2 and 2 together a little bit more. I mean, it could be kind of a fake, I guess, but it could also be Storms. And you got to be real careful about that, as you have no direct counter to Storm. Warp Prism, I just got to believe wasn't seen. But of course now it is by the supply depot, because there's nothing here. But a quick reaction kind of solves the problem. A quick, decisive, and really well adjusted reaction, too. It's very easy. Oh, God, the storm's coming in. Oh, God. Oh, God, the storms. Oh, my goodness. Okay. I was going to say, you could really miss-split in this scenario. You could send 2 medevacs instead of 3 to the main and get overwhelmed, and it gets really bad really quick. But even with the storms added in there, that did not overwhelm, because Byun brought 3 medevacs of units and a real good amount of marauders, too. The things that actually live through, you know, multiple storms or a storm and a hit from a zealot. So, good reaction, I'd say, overall. I mean, it sucks you got to bathe in the storms for a little bit, but you got to do what you got to do. 12 SCVs go down, handful of army units. Really not too bad, I would say, though. 3 CC is up and running. So, replacing those SCVs, if they're already being at a good count, not the worst deal. Now, the problem for a Terran player here is really threading the needle. Trying to get your offense going while being afraid of storms, but then before they get comfortable adding on, you know, 4th base, Colossus, double upgrades, and, you know, more maxing out, right? Which is what Nightmare's trying to do right now. And if you can't do anything aggressive against them until that point, well, then you've kind of just submitted yourself to a pretty late-game TVP, which is not unwinnable, just for some people more annoying than others. 4th CC is on the way. Tanks protected by a little Sim City. Ghost Academy obviously going to be in play. It's 3 CC, it should be, but we also have storms. And we are getting to a better, more perfect Terran army. Nightmare, his main problem was absolutely going to be upgrade, so double forge. It's a bit greedy, but he's really got all the tools to buy time and scout. He's got the Warp Prism, double Warp Prism. I thought that was the case. He's got double Warp Prism to threaten run-bys. He's got the army in the middle of the map that threatens surrounds plus storms when Byun isn't paying attention. And there is a small chance that Byun doesn't pay attention if he's distracted by a Warp Prism. In this case, that Warp Prism was complete failure. Vikings popped at a really perfect time, even though the missile turret wasn't done, and took it out. Fortunately, that is the second Warp Prism. The one with the cheaper units, and the one with the High Templars is still running and gunning. This could get weird. Unfortunately, not so much weird, it's just straight up bad for Nightmare. You know, there's no chance to even try initiate. I don't think you'd ever go for a full-on base trade here, but I think you could have left half your zealots in that 3rd if Byun had just continued running to your side of the map. And then it would have gotten really weird really fast. But now that the positioning is known from both players, Observer on the Terran, and for Byun, he just kind of figures that's where the army has to be there. I guess it could have recalled, actually, but it's kind of stuck on the right side of this map. We have, I want to say, like a Who Blinks First situation. I do like the way that Nightmare is trying to control this as well. I really like that scan. I think taking the eyes away is extremely helpful. Because Nightmare is playing with fire still. Like, his main army isn't necessarily better than the Terrans. Like, it's got to get those storms off. It's got to get some type of surround, and that's exactly what Nightmare is trying to set up here. It might kind of turn sour on him, though, because the whole Protoss army isn't attacking where the storms. Colossus do come in eventually, but that's a lot of area for the Marauders to split, and split they do. A couple of storms come in here, but after so much of the Protoss army was already dead, you could see how in a perfect world that would have gone beautifully for the Protoss. Instead, it goes a little sideways. Didn't go so hot. The last Colossus will fall to the remnants of the Terran forces, and Byun holds on to about a 20 supply lead after Nightmare actually gets rebuilding on his army. So, I mean, I really think it could have been better for the Protoss, but I also think it could have been a lot worse. So, it did land somewhere in the middle. I would say the main problem for Nightmare at this point is that he hasn't disrupted the Terran very much. The fight happening in the middle with absolutely zero other things happening, any run-bys or Warp Prism threats, I feel like does actually start to put the power a little bit more in the Terran's hands. But Nightmare is on 4 bases, going up to 5. He's got Colossus rebuilding, and kind of have to hope, I guess you have to presume, that they have backup High Templars for storms in case things go south. But, again, that army isn't as impressive as it might look, and a couple of EMPs take away the storms and the charge lot shields. They could get deleted real fast. Right now, though, there is an upgrade discrepancy. Nightmare on 2-2 versus 1-1, so that is helping his Zealots quite a bit, unless they get combo EMP'd Widowmine. That is the combination that suddenly deletes 20 supply out of your army, and all the protective buffer of your army as well. And that's the conundrum that the Protoss army usually finds itself in, is that the charge lots look big and bad when there's a huge number of them, a part of your army, and they're really good if they get a surround. But you start trying to chase after an army like this from Byun now that it's bulked up, it's got EMPs, it's got similar upgrades, and those Zealots just melt while doing nothing. The rest of the army's catching up, and it just, it ends up being a waste. So that's why we see, Max Packs, for instance, is really good about identifying a situation in which, like, the Zealots aren't that helpful, actually. They're not emergency defending, nor are they capable of chasing after an army. So he just sends so many Zealots, like a comical number of Zealots, away. Because you don't need those 10 extra Zealots in your main army. They're better off harassing. But Nightmare, he keeps the army as it is, doesn't go for any harassment, and now he's the one being harassed. And this is kind of what I was getting at. It felt like Nightmare lost a lot of that potential that he had in the first 10 minutes when he had the War Prisms, when he had some of that map control, when he had his units coming from multiple different directions, and now it's all gone. And Byun also has been able to really just focus on his attack for a while. Finally, we are getting some Zealot harassment. And this is very much necessary, especially as Nightmare deals with his own harassment. Drop in the main base. Actually not that bad. Handled pretty well. But now a drop onto the 4th. And Colossus are left alone. Nightmare with a huge mistake. Got pulled too many different directions with a lower army supply and could not protect the Colossus there. Thankfully, Shield Battery Overcharge will save the second one. This game is not over yet, as Byun actually even lost his 3rd CC. Yes, he did. So, striking when it mattered most, arguably, Byun was obviously paying attention to his offense and did not at all pay attention to his command center. Now, he still has extra command centers. That's a real bummer right now. He got 4th Planetary, making up for some of the lost income, but then also 3 additional command centers already. That kind of sucks, actually. Because if you hit them with a Zealot run-by that kills 20 SCVs or an orbital, then before they have all those CCs started, then obviously they're going to put all that money bank into replacing it, and you've kind of delayed this phase of Terran for an X amount of time, particularly if the battles are still ongoing. Then maybe you delayed this indefinitely, but you didn't. So killing a base is fantastic. They've already started to make up for that just by the extra orbital thing. Nightmare has done a great job, I guess, bridging the Templar to Gateway to Colossus to, an actual late game, I suppose. We're on 6 bases to 5 almost at this point. Alpha is still alive and doing well on the upgrades. 3-2-1 versus now 3-3. Byun can even start adding in air upgrades, which I would assume he'd start to do, or building upgrades as well. Nightmare, shockingly enough, there's been times where maybe he wouldn't have been able to afford it or have the time for it, but has not gone into Disruptors. And Disruptors is still kind of critical to late game, or even mid game, but I think particularly late game, because the only thing that's really not heavily countered, Storm is heavily countered by EMP, even with the reduced radius, and Vikings, they do counter Colossus. It's a little trickier with good micro and stuff, but they do. Disruptors are that third option that, they get the shots, they get the crowd control, they at the very least buy time or buy focus fire, so you can try and leave or mold the battle to go some way. And he just doesn't have any of those. And he also doesn't have any Immortals, something else we've been seeing some other Protoss experiment with, like a good 4 or 5 Immortals in their army. This army is intimidating to a casual player. If I'm Byun as a Terran right now, I'm terrified of this army because I suck. But versus a professional Terran, this actually isn't that great of an army. Again, you drag those Zealots away while getting them EMP'd, or they're just not part of the fight. Vikings just took out the Colossus without it ever getting a beam down. Storms do come into effect, actually. The EMP did not hit every single one. That's thanks to the Warp Prism, so that is still good. That's a great anti-micro maneuver, but it's not 100% dependable. And that was just an emergency storm right there, too. Make sure that Byun did not capitalize on killing the Colossus and a large chunk of the army. His planetary wasn't even done, but it is. It's like 2 shots and it's gone. Byun is going to initiate that base trade, something that I thought might have happened earlier on, but now is absolutely happening. Nightmare going to bring his entire army back home. Already has Zealots going for a run, but I think this is absolutely critical. You got to have 2 things happening at once. Basically, in StarCraft, that's always a good thing to be doing. But it's even better in certain situations with certain races. And actually, the Zealots are just going to go ahead and make Byun say, you know what, it's not worth it. And it makes it awkward because he just lost a 4th base for free, as well as 33 SCVs. Thankfully, saved the orbital this time. So that was a good 30 seconds there for Nightmare, who chose everything appropriately, and Byun was the one that was waffling a bit there. But I'd still say this army it's got to really be respected, man. Nightmare could actually lose his army in the blink of an eye if he miscontrols it. If he loses the Warp Prism or gets all of his High Templars EMP'd, this army's now even mostly Stalkers. There's not even as many Zealots. Okay, there's 25 Zealots. All right, fine. But it's a lot of Stalkers, which are actually very vulnerable. They are not difficult units to go up against, and that's ultimately what I think is actually my problem with this, is that it's not a difficult army to engage with if you can take out the Warp Prism. The Warp Prism is the most complicated thing right now with the High Templars inside of it. But it's so fragile. It is so easy to lose that. So usually your other kind of Hail Mary, oh my god, things are going poorly for me, let's do something, is a Disruptor. And he doesn't have any of those. And the army is not great at standing and fighting, honestly. I don't know, let's see how it goes. Warp Prism is being kept away because there's so many Vikings that'll get one shot. But obviously, if he drops out the High Templars, they're going to get EMP'd. We got 9 ghosts on the field. Byun making sure to take care of all the run-bys so he can focus primarily on the engagement. Once again, taking out the eyes in the sky. Nightmare has done a wonderful job expanding behind the control that he's gotten here. Byun not finding that one perfect engagement, so he is being kept a little cowed here. A Nightmare right to expand during that, but maybe not going to actually keep his expansions. At least the gold base will be going down. A couple of Vikings will go down. I mean, the Stalker numbers are great at taking down Vikings. The problem is that the Vikings have 2 jobs, and they can do those jobs pretty freaking quickly. So they might do it before they die. Here come more High Templars. High Templars coming out from everywhere. EMPs have been slapped down on almost all the units, but there's just so many High Templars. A lot of very weak Marauders right there. One more storm would be beautiful, and we got some in the pocket. No other AoE. No other AoE. Nightmare also not rebuilding his army, is actually having a big macro problem. He's out at 150 supply and has 3,000 minerals in his pocket. He's got 12, almost actually 16 gateways. Hey, that's a great number, but you actually need to be building that entire time. Now warping in Stalkers. That's actually a really good maneuver right now because the Terran army is so overstimped and so overstormed that absolutely the micro of the Stalkers would have won out. Byun recognizes it, tries to get out of dodge, but ultimately fails to get out in time. Nightmare pushing through. I mean, the storms landed when they needed to. The medevac numbers weren't that high. They were also exhausted of their energy because there'd been so many what-if battles and just generally not that many medevacs. I mean, if you could, you would have wanted up to like 7 or 10 medevacs in that fight with energy alongside an appropriate number of Vikings, but that's the balancing act that can be difficult. And with that fight going so poorly, Byun is actually dead. Byun's army supply might have a chance, again, if storms don't hit, but storms have been hitting. My entire analysis has been, if storms don't hit, Nightmare is in a fuck ton of trouble. That is actually what it boils down to. But fortunately, Nightmare's pretty good at micro. He's got the backup High Templars as well when necessary, and he has always had some in his pocket to either help keep him alive in some of those scarier moments early on in the game, or to actually finalize the game in his favor. Byun now down 30 army supply. I would still say technically has a chance to win a battle, but now he has to win a battle and then the next battle and then the next battle because Nightmare has taken over the map, has a lot of production, and presumably will have time to rebuild an army should he, lose a fight. Mass charge lots are also now just like totally fine. It's kind of a whatever army will do the trick pretty much unless they funnel through into 12 Widow Mines. And EMP plus Bio with 3/3 still pretty scary for those Zealots. I mean, you see Nightmare respecting how good the Terran army can be. And yet, once again, the medevacs are out of juice. The army is staying injured. And that has really been one of the main problems throughout the series. One of the big issues of dealing with the type of army and game that Nightmare has been playing. Byun clearly not paying attention from the get-go. It's a lot of zealot swipes on his army before he really takes the battle. Medevac's not even doing anything at this point, and this is going to be it. And you can see the army supplies actually got way closer because the battle wasn't too bad for Byun. Neither was the one before it. He just didn't have a bank. Nightmare had a bank, and while he didn't use it, maybe religiously, he had it. Byun, I think, in this game, besides the time which he made 3 orbitals, did not have a bank. So GG's, Nightmare. Surprising to me, it takes game number 1. That's a very well done, very well executed style of play. In the bottom right, we do have Nightmare. And in the top left, we have Byun. Just going to go ahead and check out their Ligulac score. Nightmare played that very frustrating style that Protosses can play. And that's kudos to him. You know, whenever I say something's frustrating or something's kind of bullshit or any of that, I guess, you know, usually I'm saying it very much with the feeling of the opposing player in mind. I don't truly have any strong opinions about balance. Certainly not when watching games. And so it's more just like, I know what that's like, even if I'm much worse than both these players. A lot of Terran players will know what it's like to face someone who plays that style. And they know that the EMP could change things around, but they don't get the EMP, or they know that run-bys will be a problem, but they don't protect themselves against the run-by. And then whenever they try and actually make a move against the Protoss, it's kind of evasive. You know, they're really avoiding taking that one dramatic battle, which you would probably win as the Terran. But then the Protoss is trying to kind of chip at you. And Nightmare really did that quite well, actually. Not gonna lie, I kind of didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. I know his micro's pretty good with the High Templars. That was not what I doubted him on. I kind of doubted him generally on his decision to pull the trigger or not pull the trigger. You know, being out in the map like he was, it was about a 20-minute game. I could have seen him take a really fatal fight 5 times. Because he almost did twice in that last game. He almost took such a bad battle that it could have gone way worse, I think. But for me, like, Nightmare is still one of those Protosses who, you know, as I said, he zigs when other people zag. Well, sometimes actually a really bad thing, you know. And he didn't do any of that. Or he didn't do it enough to lose the game, obviously. He did make some mistakes. It wasn't flawless, but he was definitely playing better than Byun. And I think Byun just really was not capable of finding the deer in the trap, you know. He was trying to set up a trap, which is kind of basically, I'm going to get the main fight going. And Nightmare didn't take the bait for the most part. I was also kind of worried because Nightmare wasn't being as active with the run-bys initially, but once you saw those zealots start to get involved, obviously the orbital went down, and though Byun had already done things to make up for it, those are the things that you really want to be doing. At the very least, to distract the Terran's focus, because the Terran is waiting for that moment to shut their jaw closed on your army. And it can be very frustrating, because maybe even more frustrating than like pure mass gateway, which starts to throw units this way and that, you know, and that's just, you feel stupid when you can't defend it. But even more frustrating is seeing that High Templar game and being like, if I just get that EMP, come on. Anywho, I think Nightmare generally can play that Protoss game pretty well. The one that makes the Terran player go, wait, well, maybe I shouldn't. Well, wait, hold on, I need to worry about this. And okay, well, no, I could do this, but I didn't quite get it. Let's see here. So, yeah, generally, Byun does win against Nightmare. I was not wrong about that. In fact, he very much wins against him. In the last year or two, it's been a little closer than years prior to that, and that kind of makes sense, I guess. But I'd still be pretty surprised if Nightmare 2-0s here. He is setting up for, once again, a Blink opener, this time with only 2 gateways. So I'm going to go ahead and just say it. I think Nightmare went 3-gate last game because he was more scared of Byun. And Byun did open with the high ground command center, but that is scouted. And actually, I don't think he even... And Nightmare doesn't even know about the double cyclone. But the Nightmare also went triple adept last game, and I guess he just... I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious. Like, he wanted to do some more harassment with Triple Adept and was denied because of the 2 Cyclone. He was also denied Vision. It was a little scary, but it was still kind of weird seeing 3 Adepts into Twilight. This is much more what I'm used to. Actually, yeah, 1 Adept did die. So yeah, this is pretty much exactly what you'd usually expect from the Blink opener. This double Cyclones cannot chase into a decent number of Stalkers, like 1 more than them. It's a little dangerous. And such... no action in this game. Byun just wanted to use these Cyclones for a little bit map control. He is wary of, once again, a potential Blink attack, as he did scout that it was a Twilight Council, and has not gotten the second scout to see if their Nexus timing or the amount of gateways, so he has to play just defensive. It's really not that bad, though. I mean, you're not doing much else as a Terran player. You could argue that if you knew for a fact Nightmare was going to 3 Nexus and not try to attack you, you could have chosen a different build, but... you know, it's not the worst thing here. We do have more gateways coming down. Templar Archives, all looking very familiar. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. In fact, improve on it. Again, he goes 2 gateway into Nexus rather than a 3rd. He saved that little bit of cash. Once again, no Warp Prism. I mean, when you compare this to Max Pax, and Max Pax is a great comparison because he goes Twilight Council all the time and he's really good, he always gets the Warp Prism. Even if he doesn't end up dedicating a lot to the Stalkers, although he does tend to dedicate to an attack of some sort, 3 gate, 4 gate, right? But even if he doesn't end up dedicating, I mean, his usage of the Warp Prism really makes it shine, makes it seem very much worth the 275 mineral investment. Where Nightmare is clearly like, yeah, I can wait. And there's really no arguing against that. If he's not going to use it to attack or to micro, he doesn't really need to worry about making Byun panic at this point. I mean, it's always nice when the Warp Prism's there, making the Terran player side-eye all the time, but it's not necessary. Yeah, you can wait. And that's exactly what he does. Waits until he's really getting into that storm for the Warp Prism more than anything else. And would not mind seeing the second Warp Prism again this game. I thought it was a good idea in the last one. It just kind of failed. And, you know, there's no guarantee that this time around it will fail. But I think having a Warp Prism for your High Templars, it's necessary. Having a Warp Prism to go for harassment is just so good. I mean, it's not quite necessary for the Protoss race in this matchup, but it kind of sometimes feels that way. It is so good. Double Medivac drop right off the bat, hoping to skirt around any Observer presence. Unfortunately, it didn't. Nightmare was looking, and he was looking. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. And this could be game over real quick. Scan of the Natural didn't reveal anything. I think it might have saw the tail end of the Warp Prism, but that could have just been going to the 3rd. You know, Byun doesn't know that he's about to be pounced. He should be paying attention, though, just in case. Oh, my God. No. Oh, the feedback and the storm and the blink and the... okay, that's like... all right, okay. Just shy of getting that Wombo combo... Mambo? I don't know what we need to come up with a 3rd in case it's a... I guess you can call it like a hat trick, I guess? Sports terminology? Anyway, he almost got all 3 things down. Missed it by that much. So, double Medivac drop did not work. It was kind of a gambit. You know, he did not do that last game. Right? I don't think he did. Yeah, no, he didn't. And so this time around, tries it and doesn't work with it. But now also... Nightmare, who did take some stance on the map in the last game, but did not initiate a fight, this time initiates a fight. Despite the tanks being sieged up and the army having returned home, and much of the army actually just available, you know, double Medivac wasn't the only part of Byun's army, he actually went in there. Got some storms down, definitely injured up the army, costing the Medivacs a lot of juice. Didn't actually get a lot of kills. But, you know, that's a concern. That is absolutely a concern. You need to be careful as a Terran player to make sure you have Medivacs and Medivacs healing, particularly when you get into the Colossus as well, which you saw in the last game. I didn't highlight so much, but I bet you we could have watched that game back again, just watching the Medivac energy and the Viking production and which one he was choosing, and we could have found a lot of mistakes and a lot of improvements there on just what he was choosing and how long he was waiting between stims. But obviously, a lot of the time, he's losing Medivac energy because he is just being stormed. Straight up. The Nightmare is once again moved on to a 4th base with a Colossus on the way. No double upgrades this time, so not as confident, perhaps, in his control over the map. Maybe because he also did take an engagement. They didn't really win. He's also a little more concerned, but he's at least getting 1 upgrade. So that means that Byun will hold on to an upgrade lead, something that he was not able to do in the last game. I think he was 3-2-1 versus 3-3, so that's kind of the same. Yeah, so he lost it pretty quick, actually, the upgrade lead. So this time around, it's going to be a little better in that department. We once again have a static game from the Terran, just realizing they can't really move out. They're not going to be able to move out at that very particular time before Colossus can help, but after they have Ghost to EMP the storms, it's a little sliver. And so Byun, perhaps also with that last game in mind and how he played a little more active, is thinking, well, maybe if I was less active, it would have been fine. If I didn't try and hold on to that middle part of the map, then maybe I would have not lost a third CC, and I would have not been distracted at a pivotal moment, and whatever else. And that's a fine way to play. You can wait as a Terran player till you're maxed out with all of your technology and all of your upgrades and your fourth base of the planetary before you try and look for the engagement. It's just that Byun kind of did that last game, but then still had his army in the middle of the map, controlling that Xel'Naga, trying to get some type of map presence, but then also, again, hoping for that overextension from the Protoss so that he can take a main fight. And certainly Oceanborn doesn't have that same type of setup where the Xel'Naga is just there and you want to take it. You see Byun trying to set up a double attack, but this first attack on the right side is just, it meets the entirety of the Protoss army. So an attempt to try and confuzzle the Protoss player by making them do 2 defenses at once turns into Byun emergency running back home to defend the incoming Protoss army. Zealots also in the third and natural are distracting as the planetary was not set up, so that has to lift. It might actually survive because it can lift, though, to be fair. This battle is not going super well for Byun. Held up on his own ramp against the Storm's Colossus, even a couple of Immortals. I like that addition a lot. Now, they're also still kind of vulnerable to EMP. The difference is that usually their shields pop, and then they're not target fired because they're in the mix so much. So I'd say, Zealots, they're just running forward and they're basically trying to die. The Immortal, if it gets EMP'd, decent chance it survives. It's too deep into the Protoss army. Byun's Viking count's not that high right now. 2 Colossus isn't the biggest threat to a concave of Marauders with 2-2, but it is a threat. And those Vikings are not getting as many shots off as they would like. Once again, medevac energy also a huge problem. Another stim further injuring the army. Tanks only now really getting into the battle. We do have a very large concave, but a very, very, very weak Marauders. All the Immortals are gone, but the 2 Colossus are still holding on. And because those Marauders and Marines are in the red, they are getting one shot. Byun's supply, disappointingly low. Not quite out of the game yet, but when you combine the fact that his 4th CC is still not down while Nightmare takes his 5th, starting to feel like Byun is just out of this game, not able to kind of track Nightmare's way of playing to get into his own comfort zone. And for Byun, you got to assume his comfort zone is being on the attack. And I will say that generally, when I think about very, very top Terrans and their potential weaknesses, I would say that, to me, one of the highlights, one of the things that I think back on, are a lot of top Terrans not getting to be aggressive versus the Protoss. And it does make them feel less lethal. Makes them feel like, they're not hitting their groove. Because most of the top tier Terran players is very good aggressively, and the race in general is good aggressively. So this doesn't feel like a Byun game, actually. It's maybe a hero Marine game from a couple years back, and he's losing regardless. I don't think Hero Marine does this any better either. 4th is an orbital, actually. Needs that economy, but also can lift. Kind of a benefit to it. This was not the best fight there from Nightmare. A lot more units from the Terran player than perhaps he expected, losing a lot of these Stalkers, as they do not take the Marauders on head-to-head, all by their lonesome. Not unless their numbers are way bigger. So Byun takes a kind of good fight, just not nearly enough. Still lost SCVs, still only now getting his 4th base actually mining. And Nightmare has had no problems back on his side of the map. Smooth sailing on the macro. 3-1-1, so again, kind of a tied-up upgrade scenario. Got more Colossus on the way as he identifies there is a air problem. There's not that many Vikings. If there was 12 Vikings still alive from previous battles, you probably don't go back into Colossus, but if there's only 4, and the guy is obviously having a medevac problem as well, you really want to make him pick and choose. And that is what Nightmare is doing here. The 2 Colossus are still alive even. Moving up to 4. Nightmare, just controlling Byun. In the first game, it was more contested. That second game, it was like he was controlling Byun's puppet. Byun could not do anything but follow the strings. So again, not the best Byun game, I would say. Not what you would expect or hope for when you see Byun. And all right, Nightmare. I think a little bit of an upset, and the history does lean towards that, so I'm not completely wrong. So I think a little bit of an upset, but well-deserved. Nightmare playing some great PvT. Now advances on to face DRG in the winners match. Alrighty, Roo, in the top right of Ghost River, we do have a Nightmare. And in the top left, it is DRG. So this, I believe, is the shortest map in the map pool. Not by too much more, just by a second. But it can add up, especially when you add in the particular way in which the map is formed. And it is a unique map. Got that U shape, sure, but then you have these mineral blockers alongside rocks. That, I guess, would make this that much shorter. Yeah, I mean, like, comically short, but it's already fairly short. And then, you know, the rest of the map, which kind of feels like an afterthought because you're just stuck up on the top side with your opponent. But PvZ, so we've seen some TVZs on this map, and, you know, that can actually cause a lot of problems. In fact, I mean, this map can cause a lot of problems because it is so short. There's some concerns, I suppose. So we've seen some really awkward games where the Terran player can initiate that aggression very early on. The Zerg player is like, oh, how do I defend this on such a short map? Plus, it's decent for Reapers, I guess. You got some hop-ups and escapes and whatnot. But for PvZ, there's not as many options for a Protoss player to take advantage of the early game compared to a Terran player. And Zerg is actually the one that would take advantage of that a lot of the time, but only if they went for an early pool, which is pretty out of meta at this point. So, you know, I don't think this is going to encourage people to go for, you know, 12 pools all the time. Although that would do some disruption. You know, it does just by the nature of it. It also disrupts the Zerg. Is it really worth it? Two base like Ling all-ins, I feel like, I guess they've just been defended so well so often. I haven't seen a Zerg player do it successfully in a fairly long time. So it kind of feels like, you know, for some of the matchups, this map is, God, I hate it. It's so different. And then for PvZ, it actually seems like it plays out kind of normal. We had a block hatch. You know, what else is new? We have the Zerg player going for hatch gas pool. What else is new? And for Nightmare, gateway at the front, you know. The only way to get to that early aggression as the Protoss side is to cannon rush, which isn't really... It's not rush distance dependent, although it is sometimes map dependent. Some maps are better than others. But you don't do it. And then you have, what, like proxy gates? You don't do that either. The best thing you could do is proxy Stargate, but again, that's not taking advantage of the short rush distance. But I will say that some of the mid-game pushes from the Protoss would get there a little bit faster. And we did actually see a PvZ, I remember now, Rainer's PvZ and his GSL group right on this map really showed some of the difficulties versus Protoss in that mid-game from the Zerg. So that is really important to talk about if we get to. Twilight Count's coming down first and foremost for Nightmare. Did not see if he was going to, if he faked Gateway or not. The warp gate timing. Did not catch that. Whoops. Because the assumption is so often they're just going to go into Stargate. So the Overlord may or may not know about this. It actually could have checked, but then maybe wouldn't have survived. That would be the conundrum. So it has no idea. Let's just go with that for a second. I don't know about the warp gate timing. But it should be figuring out that something is odd because it is going to see no Stargate units. But while I was going to discuss how the Blink Stalkers are really abusive on this map in that Hero vs. Rainer series, obviously the other big thing that's going to take advantage of the distance is going to be Adepts. Now, it's more than just rush distance for Adepts to be more or less powerful, but it does impact them. I mean, if maybe the shade count doesn't change that much between like the 5-second differences we have across all the maps, 31 rush distance, 32 rush distance, whatever. But where they end up with a shade is pretty important. So if they end up with the shade finishing in a mineral line, that's more effective than out and about fully surrounded by Lings. And then also how close or far apart the actual hatcheries are from each other on the map design can influence how good Adepts are. But the main factor of how good Adepts are oftentimes whether or not they are scouted. I mean, if you just don't know it's on the way, you're in a lot of trouble. And as I said, DRG should have picked up on something.
Thank you for appeasing the overmind.
Now, He's only got a Ling defense, but he added on a Baneling Nest. So picked up on something, but did not want to go into a Roach game this time around. That would be a very typical approach to defending against this. Decent amount of Lings, particularly for that first wave of depths, and then the Roaches pop out and help out. We do not have those Roaches in this game. It is only 3 gateways right now, so not the most committed amount of Adepts, but it looks like that follow-up perhaps is in mind. Yes, a third Nexus is on the way. That doesn't mean you don't have to go for the Adept Immortal attack. And I would say DRG might pick up on this as well with the lack of dedication to the Adepts. You don't just go into an Adept build, even if it's not very committed, and then not use them, or you're kind of admitting that you're not getting damage done, or you're saving the Adepts for something else. So getting rid of them is very much important here, not just so you have all those Adepts now out of the equation for any future battle, but also so you can actually make those Lings worth it. If he had produced all of the Ling army, Ling and Baneling, sacrificing all the droning during that time to then not even get anything done with them, then he has just missed a very important component of droning for the Zerg, right? They need to drone and then make army at the very last second. So the Lings just do nothing, the Adepts live, you've also had that gap in drone production. It makes it very messy. That was a huge collection of Adepts. 7 Adepts went down. 10 Lings died. More than 1 Baneling because of the sacrifice issue, but that's still pretty freaking efficient. They got a full surround. One of the more efficient ways to do it. And if Nightmare was planning on going for an attack, which, I mean, maybe he actually wasn't, but I feel like he was. I mean, I just don't think he'd go for it. I mean, did he cancel a second Immortal? Doesn't look like he really chronoed his probes at the very least. Like, I think he was planning on doing that follow-up. At the very least, hoping to continue to control this area, which this area does seem to be a common problem spot across the styles of Protoss, in which you have 2 ramps that a Zerg has to force their way down. This one's not a choke. It's not a bad choke, but it's still there. And then your Warp Prism can just sit. So it does seem to be like, whether it's Blink Stalkers or Adepts or a Colossus army or whatever it is, right? This seems like a really frustrating area to deal with because it's so close to your base as a Zerg player. You can't not deal with it. You can't deal with it either. Anywho, so the follow-up Immortal Adept attack might not look as fearsome as it should, but that's still a lot of Adepts, man. He still built a ton. And he is working his way over into Blink and into Colossus, but it is a ways away. So, again, I don't know if he's really going to dedicate with these Adepts. I mean, at this point, it'd be comical to dedicate that many Adepts into what is clearly now an army. That holds up to it as well. And we got Roaches being produced too. So you do keep it with your main army. And it looks like it is going to gather a hatchery. That is something. The Adepts shade away preemptively. So I think only 1 more, 2 more died. And then the Warp Prism picks up the Immortal. Still a good use of movement right there. I think that was good movement from the Protoss. Good idea from here from DRG. If it would have timed out with the Adepts focus firing the hatchery, that might have worked. But Nightmare had the attention to go back and see that their Nexus under attack and saved, I think, all of his probes. Really nicely done. Nightmare, I think it's more complicated. Just because his Adepts got kind of bopped by the Ling Baneling doesn't mean that it was actually 100% best trade possible. DRG is now going to win no matter what. It wasn't that severe. But I'd still say it could be really complicated to just suddenly get that nipped in the bud. The follow-up's kind of like, is it really going to work? Like, what am I going to do here? Nightmare is handling this with a lot of grace, a lot of wisdom. But DRG is no longer, it seems like, going for this whole droning army. Like, what do I got to do here? He's like, you know what? F it. Let's just get army, all right? Screw you, man. And the army would actually be very much necessary for defense. It also could be great on the offense. In this case, that means it's going to be a base trade-ish. Banelings are back at home. Going to get some hits, but that is a last-second spread off of Creep, Terran Styles. And Nightmare manages to make that look very good for him. A lot of Stalkers barely not going down. Roaches, meanwhile, trying to kill this 3rd Nexus, and it looks like they will alongside all of those probes. Things are getting real weird here. Nightmare still has a decent army on the side of the map. I think it actually is mostly scary because of the Warp Prism, though, and that is being targeted, fired down. 5 Queens going after it, going to be body blocked by the Stalkers. Warp Prism gets a little bit of micro there, but you can see without more reinforcements, without consistent micro of that Warp Prism, This is just not going to be good enough, especially with the roaches coming back home. Nightmare's got some units in the middle of the map, too. Things are all topsy-turvy. Unfortunately, it looks like for Nightmare, they didn't go topsy-turvy in his benefits. That did not end up being the attack and defense at the same time that he was hoping for. It was actually decent for DRG. The amount of banelings he had still ready to defend was obviously something that had to be handled. If it was... I don't know how many banelings it was. If it was 20 banelings and instead it was 10, you know, Nightmare probably just pushes past that, lets the frontline stalkers take however many hits they take, and then probably still is on the go, you know? This is going to be a beautiful surround. Good micro, of course, with the Warp Prism, but it's just so many Zerg units. This game is over. And at the end of the day, Nightmare not able to figure out his way through this one. I still want to give respect to the game before that pseudo base trade. Because if we did get some more direct fights, then his army still has so much potential on this map. Even though he didn't have a lot of force fields, that was never really a factor. It's still so good to be abusing these ramps. But that pseudo base trade did not go well for him. He had too little defending, so that's also a lot of army that died inefficiently. Plus he actually lost the base. And then his army on this offense was taken out enough with the defending forces. It also took so much time. And that's what I was kind of getting at. It took so much time for them to spread, even though it was a good spread. And then to attack and combine and attack again. That DRG had a lot more time to reinforce, bring army back, and whatever he needed to do. So DRG is actually really kicking butt, by the way. DRG, if I were to look at this group, yeah, I would 100% say Byun and Solar wins. They both get through. And now DRG is one map away from being one of the two people to advance. I would not have called that. Kind of coming in as a sleeper. But, like I said, one map away now. Let's see what happens. In the bottom right, we do have DRG, one win away from advancing to the round of 8. In the top left, we do have Nightmare. Already with an upset under his belt, he 2-0'd Byun to get here. And I think that's a fantastic result. Historically, it does go Byun's way. It's contested, but better for Byun. This could have been really ideal matchups for the favorites of the group. Solar started off with the ZVZ versus DRG, and we consider Solar a very, very good ZVZer. DRG also can be very good, though, actually. I think that's a lot of the credit he gets is in that, actually. So it's maybe not the most surprising thing, but I think that was a solid start for Solar. And then he also literally had a solid start. Like, Solar was doing well in the first game, and DRG brought it back. But the Nightmare straight up, I think that's an upset, not a huge one, but it still is. He comes in here, he has an aggressive plan, and it didn't really work out, but because of the way that Zerg has to macro, it kind of was okay. I think his movements post-adept failure was really good, and then there was the trade, the defense and offense happening at the same time for both players that, you know, can be a lot about who prepares for it the most sometimes. If it's that type of game, they're purposefully initiating a base trade. It can be about, obviously, how your army is pre-split. It can be about time, like I was pointing out, you know. If you can get your army on top of production lines, that's really what the time is really important. If you can rush past the army, get on top of the 4th and 3rd hatchery reinforcements, then that's so fewer units that you deal with if you end up being able to collect everything together. And he didn't get to that. He didn't get to that. He had to kind of push through those banelings and the rest of DRG's reinforcements. So DRG, I mean, I do think that type of game where it kind of just happens. You know, one person is deciding more than the other. DRG did send his army to the middle of the map. Nightmare was trying to do a big ol' attack to the 4th. I still think it's there's a luck involved. There's DRG choosing to do what he did and trying to make sure he had enough back at home. Great that he did. But there's maybe a little bit of luck to it as well. You know, just how far the Protoss player had gone across the map. Because I don't think DRG had actual eyes on the army. I mean, that alone is already enough to heavily influence how a base trade goes. Whether they return home easily, or whether they commit to the attack, or whether they recall. It gets weird. Anyways, Oceanborn up for map number 2. Nightmare going to go into a more macro opener. Stargate is coming out. Again, didn't catch if he tried to fake DRG out with the Adepts, but it ended up not really being the main point anyway. DRG did prepare for the Adepts and did get us around and did destroy it, and it wasn't the best start, that's for sure. It wasn't the best start to an Adept attack or the follow-up Adept Immortal attack. So Nightmare's not going to do it. And this is also just not a map that I think plays to it as much. I mean, we have some maps where it's really on the nose to go for some type of early aggression, whatever race you are, and Ghost River is one of them. It's like, oh, what a surprise, going for some aggression. But it doesn't mean it's not good. Like, you could do something painfully obvious and it can still be very effective. That's not going to happen this time. Not going to try and do anything sneaky, like go for a Dark Shrine instead of the Adepts, which could be kind of a best of 3 plan. Not going to bother with that. And we could actually have him try and go into more of a macro game. Certainly seems like he's going to get the 3rd Nexus. DRG is going to get eyes on the Oracle very soon. I assume he also saw the Warp Gate timing. But there you go. There you go. Gonna lose an Overlord for it. DRG could make 20 Lings, try and kill the Stalker, take care of the Adepts, and get on that 3rd Nexus. But he's not. He's droning. Really, he would want to confirm the 3rd Nexus, just in case, but we can get to that eventually. Overlord dies. DRG a little supply blocked, actually. Oh, no, Overlord popped as the 1 second I stopped paying attention. Never mind, not supply blocked. So doing pretty freaking good. Obviously, Spore Crawler's on the way. He was covered by Queens, I believe, but the Oracle wasn't immediately sent across anyway. And now he's absolutely covered by Queens. And droning and +1 melee, it is going to be. No Roach Warren. Evolution Chamber kind of in a sneakier area. Really feeling that +1 melee. And Nightmare's not going to be able to determine that. Even if he only sees Lings, well, you kind of already... You should only be seeing Lings for a certain amount of time as the Protoss. And then at some point, it could be a Roach attack, or it could be defensive Roaches. Sure. But there's a chance you don't know until that +1 melee kicks in. You get surrounded, you go, why do those Lings kill me so fast? And you see they got +1. And you're like, oh, I would explain it. Nightmare's 3-base setup is not rock solid, but again, DRG just did not get that many Lings. Yeah, 2 Adepts, actually. He's got 2 gateways. Yeah. Easy peasy, right? Even kind of forced 2 Adepts, honestly. You don't really necessarily want 6 Adepts on the field as you move over into Blink. But with combination of the Oracles, they can provide... well, exactly what they're doing. Some creep cleanup, some threats to the bases. Sometimes you can threaten the Queens as well. I mean, you know, if they pop Pulsar Beam and the Lings are a little too far forward, then the Lings die, then the Queens die, you can get something. The Zerg player, I think, can make a mistake against this more than the Protoss player can force an issue. And then the Adepts will probably be used in some really unimportant way later on. We are building the Stalkers, as that is where we're heading. +1 on the way. Gateways as well. DRG did, of course, emphasize the Ling upgrade, but is also grabbing a Roach Warren and a Baneling Nest. Good old-fashioned Ling, Baneling, Roach Ravager. Yeah. And Nightmare doesn't quite know about this. Is going to eventually click on those Lings and see a problem. Here's the big surround. We also no longer have all 3 Oracles on the front, so good number of Lings, less Oracles to handle, good time to once again get those Adepts out of the equation. Only 1 will survive to tell the tale. Blink and +1 are almost done. War Prism is on the way. A little bit of Blink Stalker aggression seems to be on the menu, but it really can't be all that much. +1 is done for the Lings. Nightmare's lost most of his map control. Get an Observer across the field to get some scouting, but even his Oracles have entirely retreated. So I don't think that Warp Prism is, it's not going to be used for an all-in, that's for sure. We're going to build up to Colossus and a lot of Stalkers and do a push. We'll see how DRG handles it. But if the Stalkers can start chipping away at the Creep Tumors, that'd be great. That would be super cool. And with the Observer and all 3 Oracles still alive, finally back on the front, I mean, you can start getting rid of those Creep Tumors. Again, finding Queens that are a little too aggressive, maybe some Roaches that are being rallied somewhere. Ling run by, temporarily distracting that, though. Killed 2 probes. Has yet to scout a 4th Nexus, so DRG should also be wondering what exactly is happening behind this. A 4th Nexus, like, building at this point might point more towards a heavier gateway army first, whereas the later 4th Nexus might go ahead and give him the hint that, hey, there could be Colossus on the way. Warp Prism is actually out in the front. Very much out in the front. Oh, Nightmare's distracted. I was like, what is he doing? He is super distracted. Lings got into the main base. What the hell happened in the natural? Not anything good, apparently. Stalkers are eventually focused upon. They've been trying to micro, but they've been outgunned. If he knew... I mean, if he wasn't distracted, I think he just actually gets the hell out of there. I think he would have seen with the Warp Prism how many units were coming up on his Stalkers and would have gone, nope, no thank you, and left. But it was a perfect time distraction. And now Nightmare is just dead. One Colossus pops. That's not going to be enough. Damage is already done. DRG, not in the superior economy, honestly, though. 63 drones, 5 bases. Okay. There could be some recovery, but you can't be losing any more units. Certainly not the Colossus itself. Finally, everything combined together pushes DRG's army back, and DRG now, does have to be careful at over-investing. Stalker's very microable, especially when they're up against some SAG defense, although it was depowered, and a Colossus. So DRG is going to be forced to retreat. Not quite game over, but it was a... Well, I mean, first of all, it got some scouting done. So if DRG wasn't aware what was going on, he definitely is now. And then second of all, I think it did trade. So it's not the case of which DRG overextended and then went oopsie-daisy. Nightmare absolutely was the oopsie-daisy. He overextended because it perfectly timed with the run-by that did kill units, that did kill probes, and now his attack is just maybe that little bit less intimidating. DRG also sacrificed units, of course, so it's not as easy as DRG being at maxed out supply, no contest. He does need to be careful. He's diving towards Hive because he would really love to get that Viper out. One Viper could change things drastically when it comes to this Colossus push. That I assumed that Nightmare was going to do, but obviously he's a little more complicated now because he's really not in the best situation. So he's getting Disruptors. This is similar to a game we cast in the regionals, I think with Estrella. It was very clear that it wanted to go for Stalker Colossus aggression, and that's when you push out and you really force the issue on the Zerg. The Zerg can try and set up run-bys, but they have to worry so much about the main attack that sometimes they don't even do that. In this case, DRG, he has a little bit of panic where he doesn't have a big supply. The army's incoming. It's like, oh shit, but he's fine, obviously. Nightmare didn't even bring his Colossus forward. And now, yeah, it's just DRG doing what he's doing. Nightmare trying to find little pokes and prods here, but needs to be very careful. I mean, he is playing with fire. And you know that, but it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If you just don't do anything with your Stalkers, you don't get the heads up about the army incoming, and you do not control the bases, and you do not control the creep spread. So it's a difficult task here for Nightmare. Filing a bit of that balancing act on this 3-base situation, which is becoming increasingly dire. He really needs to be moving on if he does not win with this push. DRG was at a low drone count, did fit those drones in before adding on the maxed out supply. Most importantly, Nightmare having to wait and really choose his moments has led to DRG having an option of having Vipers in the mix. That is huge. Generally, the main reason why this is a broken push, I would say. The Vipers popping out and getting those crucial abducts. Sometimes the Pearls can still win, even while being abducted, but you really want to get in there before they're ready, and the Vipers still are juicing up. Lings on the backside coming in, though. Seems a little weird that Ling's so effective against 2 Colossus, but they absolutely are. They had +2/+1 on them, and there was enough of them, and they helped to get a surround. Really nicely done there from DRG, giving the best possible fight without those Vipers, by the way, which are out, just not involved. Good focus fire on the Disruptors. All the Colossus are gone. Stalkers are left over, and Stalkers are in a good number, but now they don't have a Warp Prism. Some of them are injured, and they +2/+1 Lings with Adrenal Glands, too. Okay, yeah, they are really good Lings. Will demolish Stalkers. DRG forced to give up his 5th base, but that is really not a big problem, I would say. 79 drones on still 5 bases. That was the 6th, actually. So he's okay. And he does still have the reinforcements. That's most important. No heavy larva block. No heavy mineral block. Now he just needs to get the Vipers involved, because I think a Blinding Cloud would be useful at this point. Obviously, Abduct's a little more questionable now. And then he will be good. Nightmare still on 3 bases. That's his problem. That is his problem, right? Like, he has never expanded. He is running out of minerals. He is all in with the Stalkers. They got 2/1, but when the Lings are cracklings, it just... yeah. And here we go. Abduct on the Warp Prism after a Blinding Cloud to force those Stalkers back. Another Blinding Cloud to the area that they had blinked back to, making sure they couldn't just maneuver away easily. Ugh. Yeah, this game's pretty over. Nightmare giving it the old college try. I just want to shout out these 3 oracles for living the entire game. That's pretty impressive. But the rest of the game is donezo. Nightmare will not be getting out in first place at the very least. There is still a chance he makes it to the round of 8. Yeah, second place, but he has to defeat either Byun or Solar. Big titans right there. And this is going to be it. Oracle's out of juice. Stalkers, not out of room yet, but they will be eventually. And the Cracklings are just so good against this. It's insane. Numbers are a little low right now, but more Cracklings will come out as larva pops, and it's just... It's nothing. It's a nothing burger at that point. Because you imagine only these roaches, even if it was Roach Baneling, and Stalkers with some upgrades, pretty good against them, actually. But the Lings... This might be a little overextension. If this was an otherwise even game, it is not. So, well, yes, it is an overextension. Doesn't really matter. DRG having replaced his 6th as well as getting a 7th, by the way. Do I count correctly? I don't count correctly. 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got a 5th back up and running and a 6th on the way. Did I say that correctly? All right, anyways. He's great. He's good. Nightmare is not good. Nightmare is having a nightmare. His Warp Prism that he remade a while ago, finally getting back on the offensive. You know, seeing no other big bad units kind of gives some type of false hope, I feel like. You know, there's no Broodlords, there's not even any Ravagers, there's no Ultras, but all you need is those Lings to get a better opportunity. And there they had it. So many Stalkers got deleted. Nightmare really does not want to give up on this game. Whew. And you must know how desperate it is. I wonder if he doesn't realize the Krakens. He probably should, though. Yeah, I mean, you can click on them and see they got +3 now. They're 3-2. All right, GG. DRG, 2-0-2-0. First in his group. Very much an unexpected outcome. Byun, or not Byun, sorry, Solar was... I guess in that... you know what? I talked about how usually... Like, I was thinking this would go fairly well for Byun and Solar. Solar's EVZ is pretty good. Byun's generally better against Nightmare than the way around. But I guess I didn't put it from the DRG perspective, which DRG is also pretty good at CVZ, so that's a good first-round matchup for him. And then if he had faced Byun like you would maybe predict, it probably wouldn't be very good. But he faces Nightmare instead, which is a better outcome for him. So he actually got a pretty good lineup, and he used the opportunity to its fullest. DRG will advance to the round of 8, and now we get to see who will continue on. Solar versus Byun is coming up. And now, what everyone probably expected to be the winner's match, it is instead the losers. Spawning on Alcyone over this man. In the bottom left, it is Solar. In the top right, we have Byun, and he is sending an SCV out, but it is for his pretty typical forward racks. He doesn't do it as religiously as he did maybe a year ago, in which I think he was doing it literally every single game. But he does it a lot more than the other Terrans. Still, I would say for me, it's his thing. So, he's good with it. There's a reason it's his thing. He, I'd say, is the best with it. I know people will froth the mouth because Maru is the best at everything that is Terran. Alright, fine. But I'd actually say that Byun is best with the 2 racks opener. He's also best with the 8 racks TVT style. It's just that Maru doesn't really want to play that style because it's kind of inferior. You know, it's theoretically the best army is triple starport, and then maybe it's not because the 8 racks does better. I mean, that's why Byun 8 racks is in Maru 3 starports every single time they play TVT. But anyway, 2 racks forward, Byun's thing. You know, as far as the Reaper micro, I don't have really a dog in that fight. Who is the best Reaper micro? You know, whatever. It doesn't really matter, though, because what I think Byun is really good with this is not necessarily the micro of it, although that's obviously a hallmark of Byun. You know, it's where he gets most of his points from, is people's impression of his micro. It's pretty freaking good. But I would say it's the way in which he seems to be able to follow it up. You know, Maru will try and do the 2 racks, and it'll be fine. You know, he might 3cc off of it, it's fine. He might 4x off of it, it's fine. It's, you know, of course he's capable of doing it. But for Byun, he does it so often, and he has so many builds that he is willing to try at any moment. Whereas Maru still feels like more of a macro guy nowadays, I guess. You know, he's not 2-raxing every single Zerg like he was 6 years ago. But yeah, I'd say that Byun's better at it. You know, he's got the 4-racks follow-up that he's very good with, the 3-racks as well. He's got 3-1-1, he's got 2-1-1, he's got 3cc 2-1-1. He has like he hasn't done it in a while. He had like a battlecruiser follow-up actually that was pretty interesting. And he's got 2 base all-ins. He's got 8 racks that he could still do, although I haven't seen him do it in a while, off of 3cc. It's like everything, and everything is aggressive as well. Where a lot of the Terran players, you know, mostly I would say don't really want a 2 base all-in. That's always something that Byun is willing to do. And so that's always very scary. Let's talk about Byun. Let's talk about Solar for a second as we see him defending against these Reapers. It was 3 Reapers and then the add-ons, which means that the hatchery actually technically could have gone down, but you have to sneak it past the Reapers and all that, something that Solar was unable to do. So you see he is banking minerals. That's the way it's going to go. He needs to get that drone down there as fast as possible. This is not something that Solar would be unfamiliar with. These guys play a lot of games against each other, and Byun does 2 racks quite often. I think particularly on Alcyone as well. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe the way the wall sets up or the way the map is laid. I'm not exactly sure why, but he does do it a lot here. So Solar shouldn't be surprised, but again, knowledge versus execution. As far as the execution goes, if you can't get that 3rd hatch down immediately, then the 3 Reapers have already done a considerable amount of damage, I would say. Just because Zergs have a tough time pivoting that fast, that early in the game, from not getting the expected 3rd hatchery. Hellions are on the way. Solar, all he gets is a scout here. All he sees is the 2-1 setup, and that's not a lot of information. He's, already been able to tell that there weren't any Marines chasing after his Overlord. There weren't any additional Reapers, so it had to be something else. And what he really wants to know, if it's like a 2-base follow-up or 3cc, he is able to tell that it's on a 4-racks, which is a pretty scary build, so you do check that off at the very least. But Byun isn't going for a 4-racks. He's not going for a lot of aggression early on. He's actually going into some pretty decent greed. Yes, he got a factory, sure, but he also got a 3rd CC and double engineering bay before anything else. He's actually even delaying his stim, which, kind of looks like it might be accidental because he has so much gas, but his minerals are really tight. So, yeah. He does get it now. So that's stim. After 1-1's already like 20 seconds in. Solar, even if you went for a fast evolution chamber build, it's hard to beat these upgrades. It's hard to beat this build's upgrade timings. And it's a build Terrans do, so it wouldn't be that surprising. It's just you still don't know 100 freaking percent. His Overlord did scout the 3rd CC. But it could still be different timing on legendary bays, actually. Solar, at the very least, got that 3rd CC scout. And since he does have a lot of conservative Overlord placement, this Overlord was actually, I think, over here or something. Sometimes he doesn't get the best scouting. In this game, it's pretty good. I think he's got the information necessary for him as the much better player and smarter player than me to determine what he needs to do. It does seem like Solar is a little off as far as the execution and the best decision-making just from the ZVZ we saw earlier today. Also, just a rough start versus the Reapers for X, Y, or Z reason. Not the smoothest. And I am worried that that might continue on for the rest of his tournament. We're going to see him maybe miscalculate a battle here. Which wouldn't be... you wouldn't really judge him for, actually. The Hellbat Edition, only 4 of them, but still, can really screw up your math. Sometimes you only have Lings, for instance, on the defense, and that might not cut it. Baneling's very much necessary, and that is going to be a decent number of them, about 10. I think that's good enough, alongside the Queens being all bunched up together, focus firing the Medivacs with transfuses. It's Gucci. Solar's alright. Be best if you get us around, of course. It looks like Byun, he's getting increasingly closer to having to just pick up his Marines. Let the Hellbats soak up as many Banelings as possible. Get the hell out of there with the Marines. You know the drill. But every time I think it's time to skedaddle, Byun It's like, nah, I can do more. Without that creep spread and still slow banelings, he's got a point. Combat Shields was late by the looks of things. I think he just didn't have it going for a while. But 2-2 starts pretty much on time. The Hellbats, they seem like they're fast. Like it's a fast armory build, but it's not. This engineering base were so fast. One Hellbat finally got taken down. The perseverance of the Queens really came through there. And Solar should recognize also what build exactly this was with the armory timing, with the clicking on the Marines. And at this point, you know, he knows that the combat shield was a little messed up. But there you go. There's the pickup on the Marines. Let the Hellbats soak up the Banelings. That's minerals for gas. He'll take that. And the rest of the game will go along swimmingly here. Solar has gotten up to 4 bases, almost to 5, 85 drones. He is a very good defensive macro player. And he has gotten himself out of tougher situations than this one. I mean, really, the reason this is tough is because the upgrades are so freaking intimidating. Otherwise, Byun has not done very much else. 3cc into 8 racks. Am I missing anything? Am I missing a 4cc that I don't see? No, I am not. He is 8 racksing. He's got 4 tanks ready to go. Combat shields, thankfully, will finish for the attack. And 2 medevacs still flying around. And this is a distraction. Lings will scout the incoming push. I don't know if Solar is actually able to scout that this was a 3cc 8 racks. He was not. I mean, it's not a guarantee that the 4th Command Center would have been on the front line anyway, but it usually is. I would say a lot of the time a Zerg player can get 1 Ling to the natural 3rd setup right here, and you can see a 4th CC and go, oh, 4th CC, no 8 racks, gotcha. And that just never happened. It's now evidence of what it is, and Solar has got to be very careful with how he takes engagements. With a 4th CC, you might be maybe a little more cavalier, you might not take the pressure as seriously, kind of be like, well, he's not really going to dedicate, depending on what you see. But with an 8 racks, one thing is for certain, if you take a bad battle and you lose all your Banelings, you're probably dead. If a Zerg player dedicates against this with all of their Banelings, they think this is the time, this is when I'm going to win, and they say, and it's wrong, and they don't have any Banelings as backup, that's usually when the Zerg player dies. So that's why you have to be so careful for taking engagements. Because even if you do take out the army that is currently here, there's so many more reinforcements on the way. Solar at this point, as I said, knows it's 8 racks. Just needs to choose his battles very wisely. He's trying to get up to Hive. Viper's also helpful here, right? Abducts, Blinding Clouds, all that good stuff. Lurkers also would be helpful. They'd be very good at time buying. It would take a long time for Byun to take out Lurkers. Byun's already on top of that 3rd hatch, though. Solar finally going in for his Ling attack. Set that up a while ago. It's a really big Ling Baneling attack. It is going to kill that 3rd CC, but a tank siege up in the natural, and Byun, whoops-a-daisy, is still getting damaged on the other side of the map. He is not entirely retreated. Now, this gets more and more dangerous for the Terran because Banelings are so effective on creep, and you are not necessarily paying attention 100% of the time, but Byun is apparently doing so. He has evacuated his base back at home and decided that he is doing so well on the offensive that that should be where he focuses. When things calm down, they do finally calm down here, maybe then he can come back and deal with this, and that's exactly what happened. 26 SCVs went down, but he didn't lose 30 Marines because he was looking too many places and Banelings collided. That was really what was important for that second there. Now Solar, he gets like the tiniest of breathers. You know, ideally that attack hits so that your 4th base does not go down, but it did not time out as correctly as he would have liked. Trying to get us around here, but it is off of creep. Marines are going to be hit by the Banelings, but not every single Marine, and that is the problem. Still with like 15 left over, 15 Marines, and no Banelings can actually force a Terran victory, honestly. Lings and Hydras just do not stand up to the power of Marines on the medevacs with 2-2 upgrades. Sometimes. Sometimes there are enough, and it's fine. But that was a little dicey right there. 2-2 upgrades at the very least done for Solar as well, but incoming 3-3 timing, that's the real kicker. We still do have a lot of Marines. The best news probably from that engagement is that Solar took down all of the AoE. No tanks, no Water Mines were ever built. So that's one less thing to concern yourself about. But Marines are pretty freaking good. And Marines off of creep are pretty freaking good. Marines off of creep in Byun's hands, amazing. And so even though Lurkers would usually be really ideal here, like I said, they, you know, I guess Banelings were the only splash, now Lurkers are too, right? If they're not properly protected, we could have some Boxer Micro be shown pretty easily at this stage too. If these Lurkers are alone, it is, you know, a diamond player can concave over them. Liberators actually went for a distraction as opposed to direct battle. It seems like that taken out pretty quickly, but the distraction ended up working. Maybe. Hive is not going to go down. Parasitic Bomb on top of the Medivacs, also under fire from the Hydras, and this ended up being a disaster. That was not it. But it is maybe also another distraction. Distraction on distraction. Byun's got so many Marines because they are so cheap, and he has the 8 racks, and 49 SCVs really ain't that bad, actually, that he is just throwing bodies and hoping to exhaust the Zerg player. Is that going to happen? Banelings roll in a little too single file there into the tanks, into the Marines. Banelings are all gone. Lurkers being concaved on, and that is that. In the blink of an eye, Solar now very much on the ropes. The Medivacs are out of juice. These Marines are one-shot by a lot of these Hydras. That is the reason things are starting to look better for Solar. Blinding Cloud on top of them as well. Really nice touch. Tanks being taken down. Marines down to one shot. Forced to flee. But Byun found his moment. He found the moment in which the Banelings were no longer available, and that's when the Terran starts to win here. Also jumping on top of the spawning pool with the one remaining Medivac. That thing should have been dead. Kills the spawning pool, stops adrenal glands, and now Solar can only make Hydras and Lurkers. The Lings, no more Queens. Hatchery goes down. Solar, 1 second, one battle, goes too poorly, and Byun ends up winning the game. It's all about the numbers here. You kind of turn it on its head. You know, the Zerg player is seen as the guy who throws bodies across the field sometimes. No, with the 8 racks, that's more of Terran's deal, and that is that. Byun brings out now a rare build, I would say, the 8 racks 3 base, and does get the victory with it. So in the top right of Crimson Court now, we have Byun, who is up 1. And in the bottom left, it is Solar. The 8 racks, man. It's the Energizer Bunny. You think it stopped, and actually never stops. That's now an old school reference, isn't it? I don't think I've seen the Energizer Bunny commercials in a while. I also try to watch as few commercials as possible. So there's that. Byun going for the forward racks once again. We are on one of the shorter maps in the map pool, and that will always be nice for the early aggression. But I figure his follow-up will change. Just because I would say it's rare to see a Terran player do the exact same build 2 times in a row. And before you go, well, Clem literally 3CCs all the time. Yes, but he does something. He basically goes between 3CC 211 and 3CC Banshees, doesn't he? Like, and then every so often he throws out, his own forward 2 racks or something. So it's not every single time he does the exact same thing. And the 2 racks has so many follow-ups. So did it work last game? Yes. Was it destined to work? No, not necessarily. Solar was getting... Well, I don't think Solar was ever in an area in which he was winning. I don't think he was ever comfortable in that game either. So I don't want to say it wouldn't, it wouldn't be a terrible idea to do an 8 racks again, just because it is such a scary build when used correctly. But I do think that Solar has a lot of other games where there's shining examples of 8 racks defense. So I don't think you assume that he's weak to it, I guess is what I'm getting at. And instead, what you'd like to do is confuzzle the guy. So if you do the exact same thing and he picks up on it and he's correct, he's like, oh, this guy's doing the exact same thing, he's going to be even better set up against it. But you change it up, do something a little bit different, put that doubt in the Zerg's mind, suddenly they don't make 10 drones, they make 20 Lings, and that just ruined their economy, and you actually were 3CCing the entire time. The Energizer Byunny, oh my god, it was right there. Oh my god. Damn, I'm not as smart as Switch Shot. Alright, so once again, just going up to those 3 Reapers. You can add more, you can add Marines before the add-ons, but Solar is usually so conservative with his Overlords that I'd really say it's a waste against Solar. I'd say 9 times out of 10, Solar's Overlords do not get picked off. Because I feel like they play against each other a lot. And Solar is very secure with his Overlords a lot versus Byun. So, obviously I'm pulling that stat out of my butt, but I think it's true. 3 Reapers. Oh, make that 2. Byun messing up right there. Good focus fire from Solar as well. 3rd hatch actually got put down in plenty of time. And this is seriously a big factor. That wasn't necessarily why Solar lost the game in the last game, but it really does mess up your build because you can only change your build so much at this point in time. If that third hatch is what you were planning to do and you do not get it, that is money burning in your pocket that you just like, what else do you do with it? You build 2 more queens? I guess. But then that might further delay your third hatch, which is terrible. And any race can tell you that the build going smoothly makes them feel a lot better. I think Terran in particular, you can really feel the difference when you play Terran of an on-location 3rd CC versus off. I'd imagine it's a similar effect for getting this hatchery up and running versus the Reaper opener. So things are already working out smoother for Solar, right? He's got a 3rd hatch up. He's got a Reaper killed. Not that 3 Reapers added too much more. And he's also, I guess, showing a little bit of the map playfulness, I guess. You know, it's also just a really smart thing. But mining out the gold to have a very secure 3rd against that Reaper pressure instead of trying to force a triangle 3rd. Just makes sense, right? And since we are in a non-mirror matchup, it would also make sense for the Zerg player to try and expand. I'm just thinking of the word evacuate for some reason. He wants to expand away from his opponent. One safety Banshee is on the way. Byun does this and then still goes into a 2-1-1. And it's because he timed it out so well, because he's practiced so much, that it basically comes down to the starport is otherwise useless. Like, you can't go immediately into reactor because if the medevacs pop out, you still don't have 16 Marines. So, I remember watching this build like 2 years ago and being like, what? Why? But then it all made sense and it clicked. You know, one safety Banshee ain't ever bad to have, and if you can then still have a kind of seamless build otherwise, it's pretty good, right? Obviously, it's not as impactful, fast, or powerful as an direct 3cc 2-1-1, but yeah. One Banshee floating around, being a bother. We have some anti-lib spores coming down. Also helpful against Banshees. 3cc comes down as well. Solar's scouting has been limited. He did not see a factory this time, for instance, and so the threat of a 4-axe was technically there. Seems like he otherwise determined that it was not worth worrying about and has been droning pretty appropriately. The Banshee is the first reveal that there was some additional technology, and as such, you should also be expecting medevacs. There it is. Overlord scouts it by dying. And we have the transfer as well, which I really feel like this is very much Byun. This is a Byun thing right here. The Banshee being included, the hopping off the reactor. Because even if it is the most perfect way to organize your build, honestly, hopping add-ons is really annoying as a Terran player. So it's, even though it is literally the best thing to do, is to try and hop off, hop on, and time things out correctly, it's an APM sync. Queen's not going to go down, despite Byun's target fire. Good save there from Solar, who also almost got that medevac. Hopefully does not come back to bite him like the last one did. Byun is not yet going into an 8 racks. That is his 5 racks coming up now. So TBD. He did not go for nearly as fast as upgrades. This was very much a different build. So he's not going to have that benefit. You can see actually the upgrades are very closely tied together. Solar had some of the bigger battles happening when the upgrades were even, yes, but that 3-3 does kick in, and it's the faster it is, the scarier it is. Right? That's simple as that. Byun has a second factory on the way, so there should be a 4cc, and indeed there is. Not on location, and also not at the front. I actually really like this. I literally just said, most of the time, a Terran player will put that 4cc on the forward position. They can protect it, they can move it to their base a little bit faster, and every second counts, and it's just convenient, honestly, a lot of the time. It's like big space in the middle of the map, right? You put it in the main, it's not guaranteed to scare the Zerg, but there should be a little panic after you literally just 8 rocks the guy. Solar's Ling, I think, scouted the second factory, though, and that is a sign that it's not an 8 rocks. Still like it, though, because 8 is also more protected. There are some times where the Terran player is out and about, harassing and attacking, and then the Lings just get a quick surround and a big bop. So, still overall a good idea. Solar is really well set up here. He's going to be on 5 bases in just a second. Banshee is going to die. It's not being controlled. Called it. And 80 drones. A couple more on the way. And he is gonna, oh, go for a greater spire. Interesting. These are always like, it's like a conundrum. It's like a double-edged sword. There you go. It's a double-edged sword. Fast broodlords on a short map can feel like it's a very scary thing to do. Shorter map, Terran pressures you, it hits 5 seconds faster, you die. But if you don't die, if for instance they're not putting everything they have into attacking you, then you have a greater spire building broodlords, which is one, a threat just as is, but then two is a bigger threat because of a short map. They get across the map faster as well, especially now with their speed boost. And they also don't have as much area to cover on a smaller map. A lot of broodlords' problems are that it's slow and can't catch up to things. Kind of take that away on the smaller maps. But he's actually really just adding on so many options. It could be broodlords, it could not be. Ultra's Cavern is also coming down. 2-2 upgrades are finishing, actually being surprisingly aggressive trying to stall out this 4th CC. Perhaps too much. Solar thought he had an opportunity. You know, a tank was kind of left there, and then the Marines went around initially, but I don't think it was as much of an opportunity as he thought. Greater Spire is going to be on the way. Corruptor is instantly made, so 100% going to be on the broodlords. And as I've been saying, you know, they just are... They're weak if they're not out. Then you've wasted resources, and if you're being attacked, you might die. But if you get them, short map, quick attack, broodlords against Terran are mostly good at this mid-game because they are a surprise. You know, if they're late game, they have ghosts, they have the ability to make Vikings, whatever, it doesn't matter. But here, it's not necessarily the power of the broodlords, especially as people rightfully point out that their damage has been nerfed. It's more just like they are broodlords, and there's no ghosts. Now, it seems like Byun has picked up on this from one way or another. He might be used to Solar doing this on this map, because I can't see any other scouting. Perhaps the lack of Hydras as well, the lack of like really big aggression. Something has told him to be wary of a Greater Spire, I think. Or he is just the type of Terran who likes to build Vikings against those Vipers. That is also very possible. Most important thing, though, whether he knows it or not, and I'm starting to second guess whether he knows it, goes for the first and last defense in a lot of situations. 8 broodlords being made. Again, as far as I can tell, they have not been scouted, and while ghosts are a wonderful thing to have against broodlords, the other thing you're going to need against broodlords, positioning, execution, knowledge. You got to have that to have those ghosts be used effectively. The scan just revealed only an Ultraless Cavern, so good on Solar for putting his Greater Spire someplace else. It was 50-50. Sometimes the Terrans scan the natural, but worked out this time. 2 medevacs flying off to the left side, nowhere near the Greater Spire. Medevacs to the right, ditto. Broodlords make an appearance as the ghosts got a little frisky, chasing after something. Obviously, broodlords are also not going to have any worries against the tanks here, and even cause some friendly fire, which is always nice. We do not have that many ghosts, guys. It is 5. The broodlords ended up being a surprise. Of that, I am 99% certain. And Byun is going to try and just buy time. Buy time by doing harassment, which so far isn't working, or by just, well, letting the base go. And 2 Vikings, which I now do assume were just for the Vipers, being used to help out. I mean, so many times Zerg players do not keep Corruptors against Terran at this stage. Byun is barely holding on. He's got a lot of problems right now. 30 SCVs have gone down. Orbital has to lift. 4th CC, it really is a question if that is going to live or not. So far it is, but Byun's also now down 50 supply. 30 of that in army. 3-3 about to finish, but is that what he really needs? These broodlords, only 3 of them at this point, still causing so much friendly fire. And honestly, that is most of the damage, because they kind of tickle right now. They got 2 melee on the ground, and that's it. And they've been nerfed, so... It's really about broodlords as the unit they are, not the attacking unit on the ground. It's the air to ground attack, it's the abusing the ledge here, it's the friendly fire from the tanks, it's the, hey, I have broodlords and you don't know it. That was scary. And if Byun can get over this hump, if he can have officially been, you know, dealt with the broodlords, which I think he's getting to, then it gets a little more typical. Then it gets to Ling Baneling Ultra in this case, and, well, that's, you know, that's the matchup. What a surprise. Byun is held on. 65 SCVs, 4 bases, trying to get to a 5th. That might not happen anytime soon. And his army supply, well, down by 10-ish. You know, it defensively could do well. Still worried about the ghost count and the fact that the ghosts are not getting any snipes. The Lings are causing so many problems. The Baneling's making some connections, and well, actually Byun does just get broken right then and there, doesn't he? Simple as that. Did not get the engagements going prior to the entire Zerg army already on top of his army. You gotta get those ghosts and tanks firing long before the Lings started nibbling. And so Solar, I mean, plays out a really well-executed game. Byun obviously very much changing his approach. And Solar is able to capitalize on that. So we had a tied-up series. Who is going to advance? One of these players destined to fall out. This is the loser's match. And the winner will have to face Nightmare in the decider. And now we have the last map in this best of 3 between the two potential winners of the group. If you had called these two to win in advance of the round of 8, no one would have argued. Not that much anyway. Instead, they are fighting for their life on Post-Youth. And the top Reddit is Solar, and the bottom left it is Byun. I got the maps wrong, by the way. So Post-Youth, I think, is the shortest. And then... what was the other one? I don't remember the map names. I have to look them up. Yeah, I think this actually is the shortest map. But we are talking about, I think of all the maps that I've said have been short, it's been 30, 31, and 32 seconds. Ghost River, thank you. There's the other one I said was short. So I don't think Ghost River is the shortest. I think this one is. But it, like I said, I think they're all within like a second of each other, right? So you still have the shorter maps making an appearance in a lot of these games. So if you aren't one to really pay attention to the rush distance times, which no one blames you at all. I do, though. Anyway. Basically, a short map is like 33 seconds and below in rush distance, and that is top of your main ramp versus top of the main ramp. And then the longer maps are, like a long map is like 37 seconds plus. Something like that. It's not, I think, exactly how Liquipedia or Team Liquid defines macro and rush distance maps for their map contests. I think they have other requirements as well, but it's basically that. And sorry, yeah, worker as the unit that goes between the ramps. That's how you test the rush distance, which is only so much information, by the way. We have a 1-Rax expand from Byun, and Solar going for a normal Zerg build. But obviously a worker main ramp to main ramp is only so useful as far as information goes. You know, we're in a 2024 StarCraft 2. You're not usually on one base for very long, as any race. So it's like, you get to the main ramp, okay, fine. It's obviously a lot more about how you get to the natural would be maybe more of a question. And absolutely more of a question in this matchup would be how that 3cc matches up against the 4th or 5th of the Zerg. That distance is way more important, and how abusive rocks and cliffs are and whatnot. But the other thing about this map is that obviously it does have an in-base natural, pretty well protected, half a gold as well. It is very unique alongside being shorter. I'm actually, I kind of was just talking about it, but the more I'm thinking about the map choices here, I'm really surprised that Solar has played the maps that he has. Well, Alcyone is like a normal map, I guess, but I do think that Byun's pretty powerful on it. But then he lets Post-Youth through. Interesting. Anyways, I can't say why he would do that. I'm not Solar. But he does. And we do have Byun going for that 1-Rax expand, as I said. 3cc into a 3-Rax, actually. Overlord on the backside, a little clever way to try and get some scouting, is found out. And then suddenly it's not a clever way, although... Alright, this is going to scout it. This is a kind of skinny main, I guess. So the Overlord can see a lot of what goes on here. And you don't build your base structures over here. There's not a lot of room, and a Link can scout it. So, okay, Solar's Overlord works out. He gets a really good idea as to what the build order is. At the very least, a 3cc pushes whatever aggression you are worried about off by about a minute. I think that's a general rule. It's definitely the rule when it comes to 2-1-1, 530 versus 630, but I don't know the other push timings. Stim is on the way. Obviously, Byun going for bio. Engineering bay, only one of them, interestingly. Huh. So 3cc goes with 2 engineering bays. That is it. They are married. That is what they do together. And anything else is arguably cheating. No, but seriously, this is actually very odd. 2 base builds use 1 engineering bay. But 3cc is 2. So what is he doing? So he's able to get... So he could have gotten 2 engineering bays and still had enough gas to build everything that he wants if he had gotten all of his gases immediately. But obviously he delayed some. And so that means he has more minerals. He also emphasized 3 racks as opposed to trying to do a 2-on-1. He's really delaying any form of aggression because he has no Hellions and he has no medevacs out in the field. His Marines appeared, actually. Okay, so he does a Byun thing and shows his Marines, and there it goes, But that's not really his ultimate plan. And I'm guessing with the way that he's very specifically mapped this out, he just has a very powerful bio push. Sans an upgrade. Okay. Well, Solar's 3 base setup with his 3rd at that gold is going along swimmingly. Should see a 4th right now. There it goes. When it comes to pushing off of your 3rd, because of the way this map is designed, it's a little more awkward. Usually that main natural production goes pretty swiftly to your 3rd. Whereas in this case, it's kind of there's a bend. I'm just thinking as far as 3rd CC push versus Solar's 4th at the gold, you know. A little short. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's kind of scary, honestly. I am, at this moment, quite surprised that Solar went for that gold. Am I bonkers? I'm definitely missing something that Solar is thinking of, because Solar doesn't do anything just to do it. But this seems really scary. Of course, he doesn't know that there has been a sacrifice upgrade. And perhaps that has really affected his timing here. Yeah, he hits before 6:30 with way more Marines. Okay, alright. Oof. Oof. Oof, as they say. Now, these Marines don't have combat shields, so every stim really hurts them. Queens are actually even starting to do damage, and pure Ling can do something for a little bit. But obviously, Byun just went and sniped an entire hatchery and 7 drones. So, he's already gotten a pretty good start with these medevacs. Still on 3cc, his sacrifice was an upgrade, and that could be influential later on. But right now, it certainly doesn't feel that way, especially because he still is also hitting with an upgrade lead. Now it's no longer there. Now he's going to be out upgraded, but you could argue that it's less about upgrades at this point, and again, more about, do you survive the onslaught? Do you have backup banelings? This is a really big question for Zergs. And it's less likely to happen the more that you're forced to engage with slow banelings. Oh, dear Jesus. I was dear Jesusing for both players, honestly. If the banelings connected, that's bad for Byun. If they don't, Byun has so much freedom to focus fire at the banelings because they're slow. And so that, oh Jesus, was for both players. Now it's 2 tanks instead of just 1. Only 1 medevac, though. I mean, you know, it's not as much of a long-standing battle as that TVP we saw earlier. It's more about the splash here, but you still want medevacs healing your guys up. Yep, please and thank you. Big Ling run by, gonna try and do something, but it is quickly reacted to, and probably an... Oh, no cancel! Oh my god, no cancel! Oh my god, okay, well that was very effective then. Byun making a mistake, was paying attention on the offense at that time, I guess, trying to C-chop forward. Now that was a great run by because that 4th base was not canceled. Okay, cool, but can Solar hang on against this aggression? This is still super scary. I mean, the gold base, you know, is taken down easily, but now it's a matter of that 3rd staying alive. Big surround trying to be set up here from Solar. It is going to be a decent surround, but there's still so many Marines, actually, off of creep. Be very scared of this. Solar sees the opportunity, is not going to let up on it. That's so many Marines that will be going down. Only so many medevacs to pick up. Solar does still use a lot of his Banelings to take care of that. Needs them over here, but Focus Fire is coming down for Byun. He knows the Banelings are limited. He just saw them all being used. More not recreated quite yet. Hatchery gonna be saved thanks to a couple of transfuses. But now we're hopping and hipping and happening, rolling around, doing everything at once. Byun feeling the groove is gonna once again go for the Focus Fire. Byun takes out every last Baneling, opens up the opportunity to kill this third hatch as well as killing the natural, and Solar is just out of units. The last few Banelings once again rolling into their deaths, and that is that. Byun with a 2-1. The aggression was beautiful in this series. The slight changeup of his build was also almost gobsmacked, actually. That was so many Marines blitzing on top of a hatchery prior to 6:30 off of 3cc. Yeah, Solar was not prepared for that and could not get his rhythm going. First, the hatchery dies, and the drones die, and then the creep spread never gets put back out there. Then you have bases all over the place, and medevacs all over the place, and it just gets so much more difficult. So Solar is going to bomb out of the GSL much faster than he usually would, and Byun has a second chance now, a rematch against Nightmare. And here we are at the decider match onto Site Delta. I don't believe we've seen it here today. In the top left, it is Nightmare. And once again, facing the bottom right player, that is Byun. So, GSL rematch. Yeah. I am a believer in the rematch curse. It doesn't always happen, but if I were to pull a random stat out of nowhere, I would say the rematch goes 75% the way of the initial loser. Hope that made sense. But I am a believer in it. And it's not just, the feeling. I think there's some logic to it, which is that you have warming up that's happening. You have identification that's happening. Like if the opponent was going to play one way and then suddenly they played another, well, okay, now you know. So the rematch, you're going to be more aware. You've got some confidence boosters. The way that the matchup gets determined can affect things. So Nightmare's been waiting and watching Byun. Byun's been playing the entire time, getting pumped up after all the Baneling snipes. I think there's reasons as to why like a rematch can go the other way oftentimes. Particularly when it ends up being a surprise upset to the first place, right? And then the rematch going the way of the supposed winner makes a whole lot of sense. And this might be one of those cases where Byun, you would really think, should have won the first series, then faced DRG in the finals, or sorry, the winners, and then made it out already, because I would have favored him against DRG as well. But no, Nightmare played really, really good control macro-ish. Like, he wasn't super macro, but it was a control game that goes pretty long. And he just played it well. The blink opener into the charge lot storm, and then staying on that as his main AoE for all of the game, actually. He does add Colossus, but I would say for the two games these guys played an hour ago, a lot of it actually had to do with the fact that he was consistently using Storm. So often you'll see Protoss players maybe open up with Storm, which isn't that big of an opener, but sometimes they do exactly what Nightmare does. And then they'll do the storms, Colossus come out, and then Disruptors, and then Immortals, and then they just kind of get rid of the Warp Prism entirely. And not because they're, I don't know, not necessarily because it's not useful to have. Like, if you can add a storm into a fight, good for you. But because it actually does get to be a lot to micro. If you are microing your Stalkers, blinking them against Vikings, blinking them to keep them alive, you are making sure your Zealots aren't suiciding to their death by chasing after an army. You've got Colossus being focus fired by the Vikings, going to be microed. You got Disruptors, although not for Nightmare, but other Protoss players do. You get Disruptors have to be microed. Sentries, Guardian Shield, Force Fields. Literally the priority of the spells start to be an issue as you run out of hotkeys for all your armies, so you're trying to tab. It's a lot. It's a lot. So, a lot of times, as the later game goes, you do not see that Warp Prism micro. And so that's something that I think I really should impress upon the viewers, that Nightmare's 20-minute game. He played a 20-minute game, and I think it's the very end he was Warp Prism microing High Templars. That's actually quite a feat. But he did not go for Disruptors, and maybe that's part of the reason. Maybe he also has acknowledged that, well, I can't believe it would be the only reason. You know, very rarely do you talk about professional players intentionally not doing something because of the mechanical difficulty. It's kind of their job is to get over the mechanical difficulty. But I'd still say it's worth considering. And so Nightmare maybe has a little easier time without Disruptors, but I think it's also just that they're a slower unit, and he's not really using his Robo as much as he was building a lot of Gateway units, and it does seem like he's going to be doing the very same thing here right now. So thankfully, I'm not just filling a void with nothing. We do have Nightmare going for that same style of play. Byun has had an entire best of 3 to digest what has happened to him in this TVP matchup and hopefully improve upon his execution against it. He has gone for a 3cc build himself, by the way. 3cc, 3 racks, no factory. Dangerous if Nightmare was to 4-gate. But it seems like one thing Byun has picked up from the games they played is that Nightmare might be opting for a Twilight Council opener, but he's never opted for a 4-gate. Even the 3-gate he had seemed to be more for a defensive setup. He did not use it to be aggressive. He doesn't even get a Warp Prism. So that's 2 things. That's one thing, almost 0 scouting for like so much of the game. So much. You know, this observer could be going across the map right now, but there's such a small amount of scouting. Okay, there we go. Now he sees it. Actually, oh, that was the natural. Anyway, so now he knows it's 3cc, but then the second thing is that even if they were to see this, like, what do they do about it? They do not have the appropriate tools to stop this. So Byun adding in this 3cc, disregarding factory for an extended period of time, very dangerous against some of the other Protosses in the field and other styles of Protoss, but very good against what he's been picking up and what Nightmare's been putting down. So Nightmare, I think, having seen this now goes, oh, okay. All right, I see your change. I see what you did. And should have his own plan of action now that he knows, like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. So that might mean that he actually commits a lot more to the attack because he thinks he has to before that 3rd CC really pays for itself. Maybe not wrong. Maybe he decides that this is already come and gone as far as a potential to punish, so he doesn't do any attack. It does seem like it is the former. Warp Prism's still in the way with Storm and Charge, so it's very much the same thing he's done. And now the question is, how does he change it with that 3rd CC? Because the 3rd CC, it's been done for so long that a lot of its investment has already paid off on itself. You know, that's a big bio ball off of the only barracks production for so long. Medevacs aren't the quickest. There's no harassment early on, but that's the trade-off. And you got a pretty big, bad army going to the mid-game. Is it big and bad enough to go up against the Storm? I don't know. We'll find out. A couple of Stalkers not realizing the army was actually heading across the map. Nightmare sent only Zealots away to go for some harassment. I do like that. So it seems like he anticipated the move out to a certain degree, and the Stalkers just didn't realize how far it had gone already. And then set up a Zealot run-by with the Storms back at home to defend. But Byun throws a wrench into things. Double Medevac drop heading to the main base, forces a recall. Good reaction, very quick there, as that probe was a great scout. But also ditto on Byun's side of the map. And this is, I think we're already really starting to see the problems here. Like, this 3cc has paid for itself. It's definitely been gotten away with. Nightmare's build was hoping to have more of an ebb and flow. You know, you didn't have the greediest build, and I didn't have the greediest build. So now I'm going to attack you while you're trying to get some type of greed. Like, you're trying to get your 3rd CC up, right? And then you don't have enough, and then I can work off of that. Like, everything has been done prior to Nightmare doing a damn thing to Byun. Like, Byun's setup was already done. He was already smooth sailing on the macro. And Nightmare's build just looks really bad against it. The only thing that I think would have gone really wrong is if Byun had dedicated to the first attack. He literally sent his units to the middle of the map with the double drop, yes. But then that army collides with the Storms. He doesn't pay attention. It's bad. And then the double drop gets dealt with later on. But Byun didn't do that. Byun pulled back, dealt with the Zealots, didn't lose any economy. Like, he could have lost his army to the Storms and the economy to the Zealots and had been all types of shit. He didn't do that. Now he's just a gigantic Terran army that's going to demolish his opponent, even without ghosts. Because now we have an appropriate number of units where you can really see the professional Terran shine a little more. There's some good splits, maybe not the best, and some of these Marauders are getting taken down. But there's also so many Marauders with medevacs that have not been consistently spending their energy. This is one of the first big battles they've had. That, yeah, the Storms aren't cutting it. They don't get the kill. The Zealot, the Stalker, the Immortal, the Colossus, whatever it is, that's what usually gets the kill after a storm. And it's not quite happening. So Byun stays at a very good supply here. Up 5 workers, 4th CC on the way, +1 upgrade advantage this entire time. Forge was actually killed, I believe. I totally missed that. But he did have +1 on the way. Entirely restarted. Stalker is forced to be staying at home against 2 medevacs of inconsequential units, actually. Inside of him was like 5 Marines. And Byun just rocking and rolling here. Obviously, still has to be careful. Nightmare, I think, just dumped a lot of gas into a lot of research. Production, oh my god, the War Prism. Oh my god. Well, that's it. Alright, one thing Nightmare was also really good at was not losing his War Prism full of High Templars in the last series, and he just lost it. Byun, looking like he set that up on purpose. He's like, I know he's gonna come after me in the natural. What an idiot. He's gonna go right over these Widow Mines. What a dummy. He's kind of right. Does start to lose some of his units a little haphazardly. Things spread out a little bit too much as Nightmare collects his forces together. But I think Byun's still pretty happy with how everything has gone in here. He's even saved a couple of his medevacs. He is preparing for the Colossus transition that he knows is on the way. So Vikings are already out. Probably wants to make sure he has 4 medevacs at least. That is the magic number. And he's going to be up to 7 soon. Still a very big army. Nightmare not going to tap out yet. He knows that he's been in a difficult game this entire time. The way that he's able to control Byun is really different. Great EMP. Is really different than the first series they played. In that, you know, he just was not able to control Byun at all. Great pop-offs on the Widow Mine with the EMPs. Storm, again, not killing the units, just injuring them. And Nightmare, without anything else to his name, will have to give this game up. And that is a very powerful statement here from Byun after being 0-2'd from Nightmare in the first series they played. First game was a good game. There was something on both sides. Won by Nightmare. Second game, all Nightmare. And if you had just put these best of 3s back to back, perhaps that would have kept on rolling Nightmare's direction. Instead, you put a couple of best of 3s in between it, give Byun some time to think, get motivated, get hyped, and you had a very, very different start to this series. Nightmare is really not one to give up easily, though, is he? There it is. GG. Byun starts off the decider with a first map victory. Game number 2, potentially the final game of the group. In the bottom right's up 1, it is Byun. Top left of Oceanborn, it is Nightmare. So now you have a real conundrum. So Nightmare, a lot of things have reset here. Nightmare no longer has the benefit of the 2-0. No longer holding his head up high, chest out, proud. Hey, I can take down Byun. Whoa. Now, Byun has kind of bopped him to start things off, so you kind of get that maybe return back to like, oh shit, I am the underdog, oh god. But then, even if maybe your mental isn't really screwed up and you're still pretty confident, now you have the problem of, well, what do I change? Because he didn't have to change in the first best of 3 that much. There was changes made kind of like post-build orders, if you will. You know, he did his Storm thing, Byun did his 2-base thing, prepared against the Blink Stalker potential, and then they had armies moving around. And those armies moving around had a lot of different things going for it, but post-build order, like I was saying. The last game was a lot to do with the build orders. I don't know if it's a build order counter necessarily, but it seemed pretty good. So now it's like, well, do I assume he's going to try and counter me and 3CC again? So then do I 4-gate? Because then that would be vulnerable? Or, you know, does he not do that again, and then I 4-gate, and then I'm just, you know, playing a game that I don't really want to play because that wasn't my ideal? Do I do the same thing, and then maybe he doesn't 3CC, and I win because I am good? Or maybe he doesn't need 3C to win? because he can clearly win against me, and he has done so in the past. Like, there's a lot of questions. I don't think that favor Nightmare, who is on his last life. And, you know, things can change very quickly, and one of the ways that we see some players opt to escape a very complicated, dangerous scenario is to get very aggressive. You know, some players, they just throw all caution to the wind when they realize they're in some shit. And they just, you know, they 2-racks, they proxy gate, they whatever they do. And then that instantly kind of resolves the momentum swing, and you're back to ground zero. But, well, Nightmare, I think, in the past had been that player, because really he was a cheesy player, but he's really, over the years, just been more and more on unique compositions, slightly different meta, but not super cheesy. He's just not going to do that here. He's maybe going to try and play to what he has been probably also practicing. Byun is opting for a 2-1 setup so far, so not going to go into that third CC. I think the fear of a 4-gate, if you do just 3CC, 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 it is there. I will also say that I've seen 3CC defend 4 gates, so I don't think it's a total builder loss or win, but a little more dangerous, I guess. And whatever other options I guess you can think of to try and punish a 3CC. So yeah, you're not going to do that. Nightmare is going to pick up on the fact that it's not at least a barracks-only 3CC. Clearly sees a factory. This looks more like the games that Byun was playing in that first series, because he opted for the double Cyclone opener both times. Pretty sure. So Nightmare is this game. So this is very similar to the first game they played, where Byun shows some Cyclones that gives him the map control that also obscures what he's doing, because the Adepts can't get anywhere close for scouting. I mean, they're never going to get into the main, but they can't even get to the natural to see what type of army is there. So Nightmare plays it kind of safe. Oh no, he is 4-gating. Okay, sorry. I thought he was 3-gating. I thought he was going to play it safe by 3-gating. He is 4-gating. So he's 4-gating even after the scout on the factory. Now, this could be factory 3rd CC, in which case maybe this would work even better. In this case, it is not 3rd CC, and I think even if it was, as long as Byun is actually building tanks, you already have a still pretty good setup. If you got bunkers, if you pull the SCVs, so on and so forth. But I talked a lot about what Nightmare isn't scouting. Gotta talk about Byun. Byun did not opt for a Reaper. Oh, it died. Reaper died before scouting what his opponent's doing, so he has no idea. Now, 3 games out of the 4 they've played, because he doesn't know what's happening here, Twilight Council. So, probably bet on that. But I'm also worried about this thing. So Byun's going for a 3-1 push out. He has delayed his starport significantly and messed up the build, by the way, got supply blocked. But SEV pull, right? Okay. That's a little bit of aggression. If Nightmare was 2-gating into 3rd Nexus, that'd be great. But Nightmare 4-gating would actually give him so much production potential that generally I would say this can benefit the 4-gate. But things are getting really screwy because the armies have missed each other. Byun's army gets successfully across the map and is going to be able to siege and maybe even bunker. The Stalkers needed to be on top of this ASAP. And if they were, they blink micro all damn day long. They take out the Marines, the tanks are left alone, it gets really awkward. But now with the tanks sieged offensively and a bunker on the way, this is really scary. Nightmare still has 4 gateways of production. That's a really decent setup to deal with a attack that's dedicated but not necessarily all in. But he needs to be careful, because obviously there's a time in which you can bust out of this, easy peasy, and then if you don't hit that particular timing, this just continues to snowball. There's more tanks, more bunkers, more Marines, man. He's going to try and cut off those reinforcements. Not a terrible idea. Not terrible at all, especially because his natural is still not quite sieged. He's losing his gateways on the front line, and he's going to need to remember to replace those. But the Stalker's going to collect SCV kills and delay those reinforcements, hopefully, meaning he can build enough to break out, but it's so many Terran units and bunkers. He didn't even really stop all the reinforcements. There's still a big chunk they got in the front. Tank does siege up. That doesn't actually get shot off, to be fair. But you still got 2 tanks and 4 bunkers, man. Combat shields invested into first and foremost. Stim is now on the way. This is too much. This is too far gone. There is absolutely a time, I think, where you could break out against this, but things have already gone so wrong so fast. Now the Robo's going to go down. Charge isn't going to make an appearance. DTs, I think, are a very, very good idea. Not just to potentially break out with them, but then also to try and get economic damage, at least stop the mules from coming down. 26 SCVs have died. If this wasn't a game-ending army, this would be good for Nightmare. But this is almost a game-ending army. We actually had Byun salvage 3 out of 4 bunkers, it looks like, because he needed the cash desperately. Shield Body Overcharge saved the Nexus, gets the recall successful with the Warp Prism. A couple of Stalkers as well. Immortal helping out against those tanks. And this will be a cleanup. But who the hell does this favor? I don't know. Quick evaluation as we see the last few Marines finally die. We got DTs, so no mules. After Byun's been slapped back down to 22 SCVs. Oh, and he's pulling... What? Oh my god, he's pulling more, actually. Okay. Okie dokie. Well, I really like the DTs in this case. 1 DT at a time. 1 DT at a time. One! Okay, that's still effective enough. That's fine. And how many more scans do we got? Oh, we have so many scans. It looks like he picked up on the Dark Shrine potential. He has been saving scans. He dropped 2 mules, I guess, in the last, 2 minutes. He still has so many scans. Well, that plan didn't work out. And while he could still try and do 1 DT at a time, it would be 1 base versus 2. And he got to figure a Raven would eventually pop out. 1 DT did actually make its way across the map as well, killing more SCVs, but 17 probes have gone down. Natural has gone down. Replacement Robo is killed, not canceled. And Byun, I think, could make a very wise decision here and just say, you know what, that was good enough. Good scan, good eyes. We'll start coming down too. DT back at home, still dealing damage to Byun's army. Looks like he wasn't actually on endless scans, so it was pretty close. He's got 1 in his pocket. Byun's army superior to that of his opponents, but the DT is the conundrum. I mean, you know, actually an Archon would also be very, very helpful here. No, that's not going to happen. DT taken out, Stalkers, and just a handful of Zealots. Not going to be enough against the combat shields, and now Stim Marines. Especially the SCVs tanking a little bit. A brutal loss, actually. I could see Byun... Well, again, I think in the get-go, if Nightmare's 4-gate had seen the attack, it would have tracked the attack so well. I don't think Byun would have done nearly as much. Besides that, feels like Nightmare might have had a chance. Maybe even multiple chances. In a different universe, you know? But it's pretty much over now. Nightmare holding at a steady 28 supply. Byun is actually increasing ever so slowly. DT is no longer the major concern. Still no starport. We are counting pennies for both players. It's just that Byun actually has pennies and Nightmare is... coming up on a big fat 0 as far as this couch searching goes. And that is it. That is it. Byun will get the rematch revenge. 2-0 versus Nightmare. And he will advance into the round of 8s. GG's. Do feel bad for Nightmare. But Byun and DRG are your victors from Group D. Group C will be played next week. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you later.